Back to order. And Ms. Edgar, will you read the next docket, please?
Docket PZ 23015. Application has been filed by Parkview Townhomes LLC for the approval of a planned unit development, PUD development plan, with waivers for minimum size, section 230-020, number 2, and what is that, perimeter landscape buffer, section 230-020, number 4. The property is located on approximately 7.2 acres at 6800 block of West Highway 22, Crestwood. The current zoning is R4 residential.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. And for the record, we lost Mr. Ender for the balance of the day, so let's remove him from the polls there. All right. Mr. Fisher, you're out of the bullpen. You have staff's presentation.
That's me.
There you go.
So Ryan Fisher, Senior Planner with Oldham County Planning and Development, and as Ms. Edgar stated, it's an application filed by Parkview Townhomes for several different approvals they're seeking, just like the last case where we've got 4 motions that we'll have. It'll be a zoning map amendment for a change to a PUD, and then the corresponding development plan, and then 2 waivers as well. So as you can see, your staff packets are fairly thick. There's a method to my madness, though, because I wanted you all to have as much of the information that I'm going to give to you as we can. So this property is located on 7.2 acres at the 6800 block of West Highway 22 in Crestwood. So we're looking right across from the Maples Park and that current zoning being R4. Once again, this is just that site information we just talked about and the proposed zoning. They're looking at the planned unit development. So here is the parcel in question. Already started construction of these, and as you'll see as we go through the site information, this was previously approved by you all, so we'll get into that in a second. Directly across the street being the Maples Park. And then we've got the current zoning map for you as well, showing that it is currently zoned R4. So with that being said, kind of significant site history here, so I'll go through this somewhat briefly, but if we look all the way back 2008, in December of 2008, the Oldham County Planning Commission recommended approval to the city of Crestwood for an application by Alfs of Kentucky for a zoning map amendment on 7.19 acres on that property. It changed the zoning from R3 to R4. And that motion passed the Planning Commission on a vote of 10-1 with 1 abstention. Subsequently, the city of Crestwood approved that zoning change request on March 11, 2009. And you have that ordinance information there as well on the screen and in your staff packet. On the same day, December 15, 2008, they also approved that preliminary plan that consisted of 22 condo units to be known as the Crestwood Patio Homes. That applicant also requested approval of a required yard setback variance as well as a waiver of the property perimeter landscape buffer. All 3 of those motions passed. The preliminary plan motion passed 10-0 with 2 abstentions. Variance passed 8-4, and the waiver passed 9-3. That project never came to fruition. So that permit expired. And then fast forward to almost 2 years to the date. On July 27th, 2021, you all approved a development plan by Parkview Townhomes LLC for 76 townhomes on 7.2 acres to be known as Parkview Townhomes. I did include the summary of those meeting minutes from that hearing in your staff packet. If you do want to look at those for any reference during the course of today's hearing, that motion passed on a vote of 10-0. The developer, when it got permits, has started construction, and then that'll bring you to kind of where we're at today and what the applicant is requesting. So in regards to this particular case, we held a pre-application meeting with the applicant back in May, where they kind of advised us of their issues in regards to financing, which I'm going to let them touch on mostly. They then held a neighborhood meeting on June 20th. I included those minutes and sheets in there as well for you in your staff packet. And then we sent out the adjoining property owner notices early July, July 6th. Our public notice appeared in the Oldham Era on the same day. We posted the sign at the property on the 11th of July, and then that brings us to today's hearing. Here is just a picture of the zoning change sign that was posted there on July 11th. So long story short, the applicant is still proposing the exact same plan that was approved in 2021. Still going to be for 76 townhomes, still going to be on the 7.2 acres, still going to be known as Parkview Townhomes. Plan is still going to be comprised of 19 buildings that range anywhere from 2 units per building up to 6 units per building. I have attached a smaller version of the plans for you as well as the larger plans in your staff packet for you to view. But really, the applicant is seeking a zoning change from R4 residential to a planned unit development district for the purpose of permitting the project to move forward as originally designed and approved by the Planning Commission in 2021, but allow future occupants to own their units in a fee simple format. So I just put this quick slide in here, and like I said, they're going to be able, or hopefully we'll explain this a little bit more clearly to you. But what is fee simple? So I went to our planner's dictionary that we use when we don't have a definition of that in our own regulations. And according to a planner's dictionary, fee simple is defined as a private property land right, sometimes also referred to as fee simple absolute, whereby a property owner unconditionally owns a specified piece of land. So I'll just touch on that little definition for you and let them do their justification of why they need to go to that when they provide their testimony. So a little bit about the PUD, because that's also another one that we don't get a lot of. But the PUD district is defined in our zoning regulations as an area with a specified minimum contiguous acreage to be developed as a single entity according to a plan for residential and non-residential uses. So the minimum size of an area required for a PUD shall be no less than 10 contiguous acres under single ownership and or unified control. So I have in your staff packets included those regulations for the planned unit development for you to take a look at. I've also highlighted when we get to the waivers there in section 2 and 4 here in a second. I've highlighted those for you to look at as well. So this first one here, when we look at the minimum size of the lot, the project, once again, is on 7.2 acres. So therefore, the applicant is going to request a waiver of that regulation, and I've attached that regulation there. The landscape buffer requirement, the project still includes the required and previously approved 15-foot landscape buffer area. All right. The approval of that Section 1 landscape plan was issued on February 16th, 2023. I've also included that in your staff packet. So that was for their Phase 1 construction. That was previously approved, and that 15-foot landscape buffer was in there. However, when we go to the PUD, when the PUD abuts a lower density or intensity land use or zoning district, a 50-foot perimeter landscape buffer shall be provided in all areas of the PUD adjacent to the lower density or intensity land use. So the applicant is once again requesting a waiver of that regulation to continue to have their 15-foot landscape buffer area. Other than that, the plan meets all other zoning and subdivision requirements as submitted. So here is the plans, once again, have been provided to you as well. Same plans that were on the previously approved 2021 plans. The plan outlines that required 15-foot, 3-foot high perimeter landscape buffer area, as well as a 7 to 8 foot tall fence along the western property line abutting the Williamsgate development. As well, they have additional screening on those vehicle use areas. And you'll see these in a second. I've included several of the slides from the 2021 presentation that show these buffer areas, because I know that's something that I've heard a lot of comments about over the course of the last couple weeks from adjoining property owners. So I wanted you all to have that information as well. So these are some of those slides showing the landscape requirements that were previously approved in that 2021 case, showing in the green there the landscape buffer area that's going all around that complex. And that is the 15-foot landscape buffer area that was required in the R4 and that they want to keep. Here is your vehicle use areas. within 30 feet of residential use. So you'll see these purple markings here on a couple of these slides showing anything abutting those residential areas. And where traffic will go, those will have those vehicle use areas as well, which the applicant still contends to comply with. Same thing here towards the rear of the property. I've included a couple other ones. Michael Williams was here earlier with the school board, but I don't think he's left. So the Oldham County Board of Education, back in that 2021 case, in their cumulative phasing, agreed to 18 building permits per year. I have included in your staff packets, I don't have a slide of it here, but I did email Michael Williams with the school board to ask if that was still accurate with this new case and the new zoning request, and he did confirm that on the email. You can see there that yes, the cumulative phasing still stands at the 18 building permits per year. And then just a few pictures of the property looking at the entrance into the site. Once again, directly across from the entrance to the Maples Park there in Crestwood. Here's our east adjoining property, and you can see down here at the map in the blue where we're looking at in regards to the development. Looking east on Highway 22, once again here on your right is your entrance to the Maples Park, looking back down into Crestwood towards the Dairy Queen. Our southwest adjoining property owner, just to the left of the entrance going into the development. Your southwestern adjoining property owner towards the western edge of that property line, looking west down Highway 22. Another view down Western 22, and here's the western property line along the Williams Gate subdivision. And then another view of the western property line. So potential conditions of approval, and the way I worded this was the approval applies to the plan presented at the July 25th, 2023 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing and includes all conditions of approval and binding elements included in the July 27th, 2021 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing, approved minutes and issued and recorded restrictions of land use from that planning and zoning case PZ 21-014. The preliminary development plan must comply with all federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements at the time of approval. The cumulative phasing plan shall limit the number of building permits issued to 18 per year with the record plat, and all internal roadways are private and shall remain private and will not be accepted into the city or county road network system. And as always, the Planning Commission here today can amend, delete, or add anything additionally to that as well. So in summary, Parkview Townhomes LLC is requesting approval of a development plan for 76 townhomes on 7.2 acres to be known as Parkview Townhomes. They are requesting a recommendation to the city of Crestwood for approval of their zoning map amendment to create a PUD on the 7.2 acres of land to be known as Parkview Townhomes, as well as requesting waivers for minimum size and perimeter landscape buffer. So I've got all these spelled out individually. I think just like the last case, we can go in and entertain these at the end unless you'd like me to go through them now, but pretty much I have told you all this information several times already, so I don't want to take up any more time.
All right, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Staff, Mr. Silliman, do you have additional content to share with us?
Jim Silliman, County Engineer. So like Ryan mentioned, this is somewhat unique in the time frame, specifically looking at the fact that this was approved or reviewed and approved in 2021, and subsequent to that, we've reviewed and approved construction drawings, and construction is underway within Section 1. When reviewing the development plan you have in front of you, we observed that there are some features that are missing from that we have in our construction plans, and I spoke with applicant's engineer and counsel earlier to discuss this, and they confirmed that our concern is that the detail we've seen in construction plans, which is typically more than what you'll see in the development plan because of the phasing of those submittals, they confirmed that what we have approved with construction plans is not negated or taken away with some of the missing items in the development plan, and I'll let them confirm that also. But that addresses some of our concerns. There was some storm sewer that was not shown, some curbing and some sidewalk, but that is anything we've approved with construction plans is would prevail. Other than that, Ryan mentioned a common note that we would request that any of the binding elements from the previous approval carry forth onto this one. Some of those included the There was a 30% additional stormwater detention that was to be provided for the subdivision. The continuous sidewalk network, and then Ryan also mentioned that all the internal roadways were to remain private and would not become city or county maintained. Otherwise, from a engineering basis, what the engineering department usually reviews as far as roads and storm sewers and other similar features, we have no other comments in addition to what had already been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Silliman.
Can I ask you a question? In relation to the previously approved construction plans, if we added a condition of approval on the development plan that said something like, and I didn't finish writing it, the previously approved construction plans shall take precedence over the development plan in terms of detail?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Silliman. Anything additional, Mr. Urban?
No.
All right, that will conclude staff's presentation. We'll move into presentation from the applicant. Mr. Swansburg.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mr. Urban, Mr. Baxter, Ms. Edgar, good morning again. Mike Swansburg here on behalf of Parkview Townhomes LLC. My address for the record, Mr. Chairman, 117 West Main Street here in LaGrange, just on the other side of the yet-to-be-finished courthouse. And I want to go ahead and start off by thanking Mr. Fisher and Mr. Millman for the initial presentation from the staff. And I want to use that as an opportunity, if I can, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, to really highlight, quite frankly, what has been a very fulsome, very consistent, very good conversation between the developers in this case and the commission staff about what we can do to address a particular and, quite frankly, relatively unique problem and why we're here today. And so I just want to make sure that the record reflects our appreciation for Mr. Urban's time, obviously Mr. Fisher, Mr. Fogel, Mr. Millman, their time, their expertise, their contributions to this discussion, and why we are actually able to get to this point and present what we think is a good proposal at the end of the day. So there was some discussion made before about what this commission has done, what this body has done in the past, and I want to go ahead and make sure I just reiterate that, because I do think that's important as we talk about this. And so again, on or about July 27th, 2021, and this is docket number PZ-21-014, the commission, this body, actually approved the development plan for the Parkview Townhomes development. It's the one that you've already seen in terms of the map. It's right down 22 out in Crestwood. This body heard at that time testimony from the developers, from anybody else who had an interest, and then subsequently approved the development plan and allowed the project to move forward from that perspective. As was indicated by the staff, construction has in fact already begun. At least 2 substantial structures have already been substantially built along that line. And Mr. Chairman, I just realized something, unless I'm under a continuing obligation that I don't know if I need to be put under oath again, although I will acknowledge on the record that I was already under oath and continue to remain under oath. Mr. Baxter, I don't know if I need to do that.
Mr. Swansburg does not require to be put under oath as a member of the bar. However, when his witnesses testify, I would suggest for the purposes of this hearing that they be resworn.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Let's go ahead and take care of that, what you say.
Yeah, that works, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize for the interruption. Thank you, Mr. Baxter. So in addition to myself, Mr. Vincent, engineer on this project, will be testifying. And then we actually also have some other individuals who are testifying here on behalf. Did you guys paper, rock, scissors for it? Who's going? Ma'am, you're
Anyone
going.
who
All right.
potentially wish, you do not have to give testimony if we swear you, but you have to give testimony. We'll get you sworn.
Just raise your right hands. You can stand where you're at. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that indulgence. I apologize for the pause in my discussion. I just want to make sure, obviously, that that is the case for purposes of the record. So again, at the time, there was a development plan approved back in 2021 for the construction of 76 townhomes located on 7.2 acres out there in Crestwood, all of which was zoned R4, which is generally your high-density residential area type of use. Again, testimony was heard. The approval was made. Construction, as I already indicated, has already begun on this project. As I mentioned, 2 of the buildings have already been substantially worked on as approved and as progressed at this point. And so the project is already underway and consistent entirely with what the commission has already approved, which of course begs the question, well, why, Mr. Swansburg, are we here today, right? And so what I would like to do at this point, I've got some additional discussion that I would like to have, but at this point, what I think is appropriate is to discuss why the market itself has dictated our need to come to you all and make this proposal change. Not anything that the developer has done, not anything that the county has done, but what the market, the housing market in particular, the finance market in the United States, and how it has affected here in Oldham County, what it has done to necessitate this particular request. And what I'd like to do at this time is ask some folks. I'm a lawyer, I'm not a banker, I'm not a finance guy. Do not hold that against me in any way, but I'd like to this time ask some individuals who are in fact very well educated in that process, who can talk to you about the market forces that have necessitated this change. And then, like I said, I'd like to talk about some additional issues once they are done. So at this time, all right, ma'am, make sure and let them come up here and talk to you all about that.
Good morning. My name is Amy Ballard. I am from Wilson & Your Bank, and I'm a senior loan officer. The reason we're here today is the difference.
Ballard, may I stop you? We're going to get name and address from everyone who provides testimony, okay?
Oh, it's
Thank you.
130 St. Matthews Avenue, Louisville, Kentucky, 40207.
My name is My name is Zach Spencer with Wilson Muir Bank, and my address is 4460 West Wind Way, the new LPO there beside Gustavo's.
I'm Caroline Kaminish. I'm a mortgage loan officer at Wilson & Muir Bank, and our address is 6472 West Wind Way, Crestwood, Kentucky, 40014.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the indulgence. Back to you, Ms. Ballard.
All right. The reason we're here is the difference between a condo and a PUD on the secondary market, which is guidelines from Freddie and Fannie Mae, who buy most of the condo mortgages, most of the regular mortgages. 70% of all mortgages are bought through Fannie and Freddie Mae. So, and condos have a different guidelines. They have to be done in phases. They're owned from the walls in. There is a higher HOA fee. So the problem is that getting approval for a mortgage on a condo is that 50% of the condo units have to be sold before you can get a regular Fannie Mae government-backed mortgage. And if it's a PUD where you own the land underneath it, you're just going to get a regular mortgage. It doesn't matter if your neighbors have sold or if the common areas are done. And that's the problem we're running into, is it being classified as a condo unit. All the phases have to be done. The interest rates are a little bit higher on a condo because they're a little bit more risky per all the investors' guidelines compared to a regular single-family home, whether it's attached or detached. The condo units have to have a budget, and they have to have at least 10% extra into that budget to cover roofs, fire, lighting, anything that you would not pay for if it was a regular mortgage. So that is the reason we're here. It will be better if it's sold as if you own the land underneath it, if it's a PUD. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the two biggest issues that I see with it being a condo as opposed to a townhome are going to be affordability. And my understanding is that's one of the main purposes of this project, is to bring affordable housing to Crestwood, Oldham County. As a condo, not only upfront before 50% are sold, is there a larger down payment requirement of at least 10%, but there's a 0.75% hit to the interest rate upfront, simply because it is a condo. And in general, as Amy mentioned, the HOA requirements are going to be higher. The other issue is liquidity. So Fannie and Freddie, their view of townhome or of condos is that it's a riskier investment as opposed to a townhome, where the owner or the buyer owns the land under the townhome. So if Fannie and Freddie lose the appetite for condominium purchases, someone potentially could go to try to sell a condo and there is no market for it, which we see quite often in real estate. Several projects that are classified as a condo, much more challenging to sell them. And so, yeah. So I think that those are the two issues that we're really here to address is if this is a townhome, which is fee simple, also viewed as a detached single-family property for the purpose of financing, the buyer, really you're keeping control in the hands of the buyer as opposed to Fannie and Freddie and what their appetite is in the market. So.
All right. Thank you all.
And I appreciate the statement. One of the things I wanted to also highlight, by the way, just for the commission members, and something that we've all, quite frankly, seen or experienced in some way, is a significant change in interest rates for mortgages in the United States. And so in 2021, my understanding is that the average rate was around 3.125%. 3.125% for a mortgage. In 2002, that number went up. And as of 2023, my understanding is that the average mortgage rate is somewhere around 7.5%, more than double in the last 2 years the rates that were contemplated at the time that this body approved the original development plan. So the market itself, as was discussed by the individuals from the bank and today that we're wanting to convey to you all, the market itself is dictated in many ways a change in terms of how the developers are proposing to sell these particular units to the public. Okay, so again, it's not anything with the change in construction, has nothing to do with a change in perimeters, for example. It really has everything to do with how these are presented to the public and ultimately sold to the public so that we can get those units filled by individuals who are in fact vested in the property themselves, who have an interest in potentially using it as a starter home, for a lack of a better term. Inventory right now at Oldham County, for those of you who watch these things right now, it's pretty slim. And those that are available right now are pretty significant in terms of their cost. You're talking $500,000 or more at this point. If you're a young single family and you want to buy a home in Oldham County, there isn't a whole lot of choice. And what the developers are proposing to do this is to create that opportunity, which is, as I'll discuss here in a second, consistent with the Oldham County Comprehensive Plan to provide options for housing for individuals who want to be able to purchase a home within this county. And so again, this is an opportunity for us to, quite frankly, fulfill what was originally contemplated, is that you would have a high quality buildings that will allow individuals to enter and to either move within Oldham County or to move into Oldham County and do so in a manner that isn't going to cost them or quite frankly, prohibit them from either doing so or set them back in terms of any other expenses they might want to pay for to otherwise experience in life simply because they have to pay higher than demand or higher rates on a home. I've got 3 documents, Mr. Chairman, if I can. So we talked a little bit about ultimately what it is we're asking the commission to do specifically. There are 3 proposals that we are asking, as was originally discussed by Mr. Fisher. And I don't know if I want to hand this to Mr. Fogel to hand up, or I can hand them directly. How, Mr. Chairman, you want me to do it? 2, of course, one is obviously a zoning map amendment. As we talked about before, right now it's R4. We're asking the commission to amend the zoning map to change this from R4 to a PUD. And I'll discuss a little bit about what a PUD is here in a second, and why, at the end of the day, this particular proposal comports with the existing requirements for a PUD. And so that is one request that we've got. Oh, Mr. Fisher's going to take it. Appreciate it. Along those lines and consistent with that request, we've got 2 waivers, both of which contemplate the the requirements for a PUD, the first of which being, as was already discussed on there, the minimum area required for a planned unit development, and that is set forth in the Oldham County comprehensive regulations. It's a 10-acre minimum requirement. The current area of the property that is being developed as we speak is 7.2 acres. So it's 2.8 acres less than the minimum 10-acre requirement, which is why we're asking for this particular waiver. We're not asking, at least from our perspective, not a significant change. 2.8 acres, ultimately not a difference between, let's say, 50 acres and 5 acres. We're really talking about 2.8 acres. And again, the developers have tried to do everything they can to make that 10-acre requirement a reality. It just hasn't come to fruition. So we are asking you all for a waiver of that 10-acre requirement down to 7.2, which is the current area of the property. So I've got that waiver as well. Sorry, Ryan, I don't mean to make you rock back and forth there. Oh, perfect, thanks. And then third, I've got a motion that we drafted up here for the second waiver that we're asking, and that Mr. Fisher already talked about this, and that is related to the perimeter buffer size required for the borders of a planned unit development. And as was discussed, a planned unit development requires a 50-foot landscape or buffer around the perimeter, particularly if it abuts lower density properties. And what we are asking is for a waiver of that 50-foot buffer. We have an existing 15-foot buffer now that has already been approved by the commission, that is already contemplated as part of the construction. And we are simply asking that you all waive the 50-foot requirement and allow us to continue to move forward with that 15-foot buffer. And there's some additional parts of that I want to get into here in a second and really highlight why we think that the plan comports with and addresses some of the issues that might be contemplated as part of that particular requirement for that 50-foot versus 15-foot. So, Ryan, I'm sorry, make you do this one more time. I'll tell you what, I'll just
Get my steps in.
get 2 more. I'll trade you. Thank you very much. Setting the mood for discussing PUDs. Thank you. So again, a planned unit development, conceptually speaking, is a zone that contemplates kind of a mixed use, various types of structures, for example, or various types of possible uses of the land within a particular zone, as opposed to what you might traditionally think of as R1 is just going to be for a house. C1, for example, is going to be a business, something along those lines that doesn't necessarily incorporate different types of uses for the land itself. It does include a number of different types of requirements that, as the staff has indicated, this plan is already contemplating. But I want to, again, specifically talk about some of those issues that may come up at this point. The first one is going to be that 15 versus 50-foot buffer. I want to talk about that first if we can. And so as I talk about, for example, the law and what the law is here in Oldham County and why it is that we believe that we comport with that and what the testimony is going to be or what has been that might be consistent with that. For everyone's benefit, Oldham County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, Section 230-020 sub 4, which was already discussed by Mr. Fisher, relates to the requirements for a PUD, provides, quote, measures shall be taken to assure compatibility of land uses within a PUD itself and with adjacent sites. And in furtherance of this requirement, Oldham County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, Section 230-024 states, quote, when a PUD abuts a lower density or intensity land use or zoning district, a 50-foot perimeter landscape buffer shall be provided in all areas of the PUD adjacent to the lower density or intensity use. So again, as I've already talked about, as mentioned a couple of times, there is already an existing 15-foot buffer contemplated as part of this particular proposal, and that goes around the entirety of the development at this point. I want to just illustrate kind of the point of what we're talking about, if I can. This is going to be my attempt at technology here. I've got a document that I want to try to put on the screen here, guys, and I don't know how we might do this. There we go. Okay. So each of you might have seen when Mr. Fisher gave his presentation, there was a map similar to the one you're looking at on the screen right now that had a nice green barrier around it. And that's the one with highlighted again, that 15-foot landscape buffer that we talked about that has already been approved by this body and is already contemplated and being incorporated into the existing construction of this particular plan. The document that is on your screen right now is a rendition that we put together that shows you what it would look like to have a 50-foot buffer around the property. What that does, if you look at it, is it's actually going to require the developer at this point to remove 33 of the 76 approved units. And you can see where the red line, for example, that contemplates the 50 feet, where that is going to cut into, look on the eastern side there, for example. Talk about on the eastern side here. Every single one of those units on the right-hand side there, or the eastern side of the property, is going to have to be demolished or going to have to not be built. We're talking about on the northwestern side, for example, all of these particular spaces here, if you got that 50-foot buffer, none of those can in fact be built. Down here, there's one unit of two. There's 2 units down here. That's entirely within 50 feet. That cannot be built. Along the line here as well, that unit at the very end cannot be built if you have a 50-foot buffer. So the 15-foot buffer that we're talking about contemplates every requirement that we already have for R4 as part of, and it has already been incorporated as part of the construction. If we have to move forward with a 50-foot buffer as required for a PUD, assuming the commission approves it, this is the end result, is you're going to end up cutting out nearly half of the units. The developer will not be able to do it as a practical matter, probably will not actually end up being able to work if that 50-foot requirement is left in place. Probably won't work overall. So again, the existing development plan contemplates 15 feet around the perimeter as it is at this point. And let me talk a little bit more about some of the details too with that. So when the commission approved the plan back in 2021, part of the conditions the commission approved were additional barriers along certain adjacent properties. And Mr. Fisher alluded to this in his presentation, but I want to talk specifically about them and highlight them again for everybody. So, for example, on the western side of the property down over here, there's a 15-foot barrier that's already contemplated, and there will be landscaping that will be part of that 15 feet. But in addition to that, as a condition for the 2021 approval, the commission asked that there be a between 7 and 8 foot fence placed along that border with the Williams Gate subdivision. And that is part of the requirements that the developers are at this point required to follow, and that the commission recommendation at least, or at least the proposal, is to continue to include, and the developer fully intends to continue to include, a fence running the entirety of this wall, or this particular border here, in addition to providing any landscaping within the 15-foot buffer that's already contemplated. So it's not just going to be a couple of trees and then open space. There will in fact be a fence along the entirety of this particular property. In addition to that, there will be fences on this side. Follow along here. I'm going to tell you what. Make it easier. Here's I can actually point more. There'll be fences here along this particular side, the western side of the roadway here, and in addition to the southern side of this roadway here. There will also be fencing on this side of the roadway right here. This is all, again, contemplated in the plan. It's already been approved and is already incorporated into the construction. It hasn't actually been built yet, but is incorporated as part of the construction concept for this. In addition, the commission, as part of its approval, conditioned approval upon, there's a hammerhead up here, as you can see. And in addition to that, there's obviously the 15-foot buffer, as we talked about, which goes around the entirety of the perimeter. But in addition to that, there was also a requirement to put a 7 to 8 foot tall fence along this particular portion of the property. And again, the developer has agreed to that. That was part of the conditional approval back in 2021. The developer continues to maintain that as a requirement and will continue to honor that requirement, and we'll be putting that fence up as well. Again, this is all under construction, so there's a big dirt pile other than where the buildings have been built, at least down here, for example, and right here. But the developer is in fact going to continue to honor that that requirement, which is not only to have the 15-foot buffer, but also to have the fence along this area to address the property line up in this particular northeast corner of the property. So again, the plan that was originally approved back in 2021, we believe contemplates, or at least in addition to the additional conditions that were placed on the development by the commission back in 2021, we believe comport with or provide at least a similar benefit to adjacent property owners that the 50-foot barrier would otherwise require for a PUD. And in addition to that, allows the developer to continue to move forward with these 76 units as originally contemplated when the commission approved it back in 2021. So I want to make sure that particular part, we're asking again for a waiver on that particular issue. The other waiver that we are asking for, again, is this minimum area. And I talked about this a little bit just to make sure. Again, a PUD requires a minimum of 10 acres as part of the zone itself. And we have a 7.2 acre tract at this point, and we're simply asking the commission to approve that waiver to allow that 2.8 acre difference to be contemplated and approved for a PUD. And again, it's all encompassed within this particular tract as we talk about, 7.2 acres at this point. We're just asking for a waiver on that front. Not changing anything else, just simply wanting to change the existing requirement for a PUD for this particular project from 10 to allow it to be 7.2 for this particular project. Again, Mr. Chairman, I'll summarize the presentation at this point and confer to make sure there's not any additional points. I do want to allow Mr. Vincent to talk about a little more detail before I step away entirely and we turn it over to anyone who might have any other comments or questions. But there are some technical issues, very minor, that I want to make sure Mr. Vincent gets up and mentions to you all and has that opportunity. So appreciate your indulgence. Thank you for again, listening to my presentation, and at this time, I'll let Bob come up and talk to you all some more.
Ryan, can you put the development on the screen?
Bobby, let's go ahead and get your name and address for the record.
My name is Bob Vincent. I'm with Vincent Engineering and Land Surveying, 1000 Cherrywood Place, Suite 200. Again, I'm a licensed land surveyor and a licensed engineer here in the state of Kentucky.
Thank you.
I know you've been hit with a lot of information, so I'll try to be brief. I did want to start out by affirming what Mr. Silliman said concerning the construction plans and the plan that you have before you. The plan that you have before you is a concept. Section 1 is delineated roughly let's see. Mouse. Okay, sorry. Not used to this technology. Anyhow, section 1 is everything east of the main drain that runs through here. That is the portion of the project that has been, the construction plans have been approved, the landscape plan has been approved. It's currently under construction. It's approximately 85%. We still got some utilities to put in place, the paving and sidewalks, and we anticipate that would be completed about the same time that the first two buildings are completed. But I did want to mention to you that on that master plan, we have proposed setbacks. The setbacks are in relation to the individual lots which is what we're talking about in converting from the condos to the fee simple. The red lines indicate the lots. The black lines are actually the building. It was arbitrary, the setbacks that we came up with. We came up with 10-foot setback for the front, 5-foot for the back. To be completely honest with you, the only reason for that is if it's going to be a fee simple subdivision, I got to set property corners. And if the property corner is not the walls, then I got to have some place to put it. So those are just arbitrary numbers that we came up with. But I did want to mention also on that plan that we will maintain the 25-foot setback from the perimeter of the property for all the buildings. So in other words, none of the buildings are going to be any closer than 25 feet from any of the outside property lines. So hopefully that makes sense. So again, the proposed master plan that you have before you is the same plan that was submitted and approved by the commission in August of 2021, except for all of the elements of the construction plan as we just talked about. And again, that's about a 10-page set of plans, which we obviously can't get all on this one sheet. Again, two of the buildings, what we're calling Building 1 and Building 7, are under construction. And again, we anticipate that they will be completed about the same time all the site work is completed. So another important issue that we want to talk about is that in the first paragraph of the comprehensive zoning ordinance, the PUD states that the PUD zoning is not to be used as a tool to increase density. So we're not doing anything here to try to increase density at all from what was previously approved. Our requested density is 10.5 buildings per acre, and the allowable density in R4 zoning is 16 units per acre. Again, so we're only about 66% of what we currently have been approved for in R4 zoning. The PUD doesn't have a designation as far as density, so that would be open to what you all would be willing to approve. The other concept that we want to look at is we are asking for the waiver of the 50-foot landscape buffer. We're still committing to the 15-foot perimeter landscape buffer and the 25-foot building setback as originally planned. Privacy fences along all the areas where roadways will be constructed, in addition to the required continuous screening of trees and bushes, will be installed. I did want to mention that I think you're going to see some testimony concerning the trees that have been removed, and none of the mature trees have been removed in that 15-foot perimeter landscape buffer area, except for the ones that were dead. There was quite a few ash trees, as you well know, are dead throughout Oldham County, and we did remove those in that area. If the 50-foot landscape buffer were not, if we weren't granted the waiver for that, we would lose 33 lots of this currently approved 76 lots in the development, and that would just not make the development economically feasible. That's a pretty obvious statement there. I did want to remind you, in agreement with what Mr. Silliman said, that we did commit to reducing the storm runoff rates by 30% from the existing, and that was incorporated into Section 1 construction plans, and that is what we have constructed, and of course that will be a part of Section 2 moving forward also. And that really is the rest of my testimony there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Mr. Swansburg,
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
back to you.
I want to just make sure I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to limit the amount of talking that I do here at the very end, but I do want to summarize, quite frankly, because I've thrown a lot of information out. I do want to summarize what we're actually trying to accomplish at the end of the day. So on or about, again, July 27, 2020, when this body, by a unanimous vote, approved the original development plan for the Parkview development, which contemplated the construction of 76 townhomes or condominiums, continuous sidewalks, open spaces, and a 15-foot landscaping buffer around the perimeter of the property. That's docket number PZ-21-014. Beginning in 2021, as you've already heard, the housing market across the United States began to realize the most rapid rate in short and long-term interest rates since 2004, based on our understanding. By way of example, the average 30-year mortgage, as I talked about before, mid-2021 was approximately 3.125% interest. By the middle of 2022, that number rose to 5.875%. And today, the average 30-year mortgage rate, give or take, is around 7.5%, more than double the rate it was in 2021. Moreover, in light of the collapse of certain banks across the United States, which we've seen in the news, private lenders have tightened their lending guidelines, and most banks now view loans that are specifically geared toward condominiums as riskier than detached or even attached single-family homes. In short, lenders are less likely today to underwrite a loan to purchase a condo than they are to underwrite detached townhouses, even if there is no practical physical difference between the structures. And given these forces, the applicant, as we talked about today, has petitioned the commission to rezone the property discussed as a planned unit development, or PUD, the purpose of which is to create, quote, an area with a specified minimum contiguous acreage to be developed as a single entity according to a plan for residential and non-residential uses. That's Oldham County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, page 61. KRS 100.213 sub 1 provides that, quote, before any map amendment is granted, the Planning Commission must find that the map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. So in November 2020, the Oldham County Comprehensive Plan was adopted and identified 85 goals and objectives broken into 7 major categories. Specifically, land use objective LU-2 of the comprehensive plan encourages county leaders to, quote, encourage the preservation and development of a range of housing opportunities, end quote. The Parkview development, the one we're talking about today, comports with this objective by creating options for individuals who are looking for high-quality homes at a cost of anywhere between the estimates of $200,000 to $300,000, well below the greater prices commanded by a tight housing market here in Oldham County. Land use objective LU-2-3 sub 2 of the comprehensive plan states that, quote, the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations should provide incentives to encourage private sector investment in the development of a variety of housing types. Land use objective LU-2-3 sub 2. Again, the Parkview development constitutes a substantial investment by private sector actors to create a unique housing type, i.e., high-quality, affordable single-family homes that are desperately needed here in Oldham County. And finally, in tandem with the comprehensive plan, the comprehensive zoning ordinance sets forth various objectives for PUD zones, including promotion of design creativity and excellence that will result in high-quality development, the combination and coordination of architectural styles, building forms and heights, and structural visual relationships with an environment that allows mixing of different land uses and building types in an innovative and functionally efficient manner, and the promotion of efficient use of land resulting in networks of utilities, streets, and other infrastructure features that maximize the allocation of fiscal and natural resources, among others. That is located within the comprehensive zoning ordinance, as I discussed. The master plan report and the development plan report that we submitted to the commission, we believe which also incorporates by reference the original plan from 2021 as amended by the construction plans and approval in consultation with the commission and its staff, identifies and addresses each and every requirement for a PUD zone, save the 2 waivers that we have asked this body to approve under the Oldham County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, and we would ask that you all move and approve accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Swinesburg. Is there anyone else present who wishes to provide testimony in support of this application? Anyone wishing to provide testimony in support? Mr. Shum, please approach. Let's get your name and address for the record.
My name is Walt Shum, 1000 Cherrywood Place, Suite 300, LaGrange, Kentucky, 40031.
Thank you.
Briefly, I wanted to let the commission know in a summary why we are here. When I started this project in 2019 and we purchased the property, we envisioned affordable housing opportunities for residents, heck, for my kids and grandkids to move into Oldham County. At that time, we envisioned these being in the 200s and 300s, as Mr. Swansburg said. We're in the high 200s and 300s now, but that vision is still available to us. the unfortunate incidents of several bank failures and interest rates climbing from the 3s to the 7s, and assumedly from what we've heard, even higher before the fall, have made this relatively unaffordable. The average loan for one of these units on 30-year term increases about $200 per month, condo fees notwithstanding, which in a condo regime are contemplated to be between $200 and $275 per unit per year. In the fee simple regime, which is selling the property, the roof, and maintaining common walls, those payments on the very same unit drop about $200, and we anticipate condo fees about $125 to $150 to take care of the common areas. Also, in respect to the landscape buffer, I think they covered that adequately. This plan fails if we have to reduce by half the number of units we're able to build. We're now approximately 2 years into the build cycle. We have several buildings up in the air within a month or two of completion. We have no signed contracts, primarily because of the condo financing requirements. What the bank was reluctant to say, but I'm going to say, is the liquidity crisis that's been brought on by the sharp rise in interest rates, pushing the T-bills on the banks and lowering their liquidity, has dried up what was contemplated under the original condo regime as the financing option. In other words, the banks were going to hold the financing inside 2 to 3 years and then move them out to the secondary market as we sold 51% of the project. That is non-existent at this point in time. So that financing option is gone. That was more than half of what we contemplated when we took this project on as available financing, maybe 3/4. Not only the Wilson and Muir Bank that was here, but several other banks I've dealt with are in similar situation. Further bank failures notwithstanding, I don't expect that market to rebound in the foreseeable future. Quite ingeniously, we thought if we could offer this as a fee simple where you own the property and own the roof, that we would be in a better position to offer this in standard financing options, which are the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac options. Also, well, I'll leave it at that at this point. I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Mr. Shum. Anyone additional wishing to provide testimony in support of this application? All right, being none, we will move into testimony of those opposing and questions from those opposing this application. For all of those who wish to provide testimony or ask questions, I'll ask you to go ahead and rise for swearing in. We'll gather your names and addresses as you approach the podium.
Raise your right hand. Your other right. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Reset that clock.
Good afternoon. Yeah, my name's Martin Mosley. I live at 6416 Highway 329. So I'm at the adjoining property, just on the screen, just north right there. So I want to talk about a few things. So when I initially heard this is going to be rezoned to a PUD, the first thing I did was research. I mean, what's a PUD? I had no idea. Luckily, the Oldham County Planning and Development Services had a very awesome brochure, right? And it defines exactly what a PUD is. Read through it. Honestly, it looks awesome. It's an awesome concept, and I think Oldham County, in the right size development, would benefit massively from this. It greatly reminds me of like Norton Commons in Louisville, if you're familiar. That's what I believe. The person who wrote this was trying to get to. The development that's currently planned is nowhere close to what's in your document. It doesn't meet multiple elements. So what I'll do, I'm going to go through this document that generated by this commission. I'm going to identify where it doesn't satisfy the requirements. So on the first page of the brochure, PUDs usually include provisions for the clustering of buildings, a mixture of land uses, different building types, preservation of natural resources, and promotion of open space. Mixture of land uses. This is a residential development. There's no mixture. This doesn't fit the criteria of a PUD. Another element, abundant, accessible, properly located, open and recreational space, schools and other public and private facilities. The recreational open space, there is lots of, you can see the green space, the open space within the land, but you'll notice a lot of it looks to be like landlocked, inaccessible unless you enter the buffer. So, I mean, I would argue that is, you're either going to have to trespass on someone's property, or you're going to have to enter the buffer. The local school capacity, again, something like Norton Commons, we're building schools. We need schools in South Oldham County. I think the school board previously, asked that we delay the kind of turnover of these properties because they don't have capacity. There is not an abundant number of school capacity in the area. They're not, we're not building schools. Local and private public facilities, they're not easily accessible. One, there isn't any new. I mean, they're all homes. There's no, we're not talking about shops here. We're not talking about, restaurants. These are only houses. The local center of question, the shops, facilities that we've got, you can't walk there. There's no planned sidewalk between the development and Crestwood. The only way to get to the facilities in Crestwood, you are going to be driving, in and out of the development. Again, this is not in line with what's being asked or defined by the Planning and Development Services kind of brochure. One of the other things that the brochure mandates, minimize negative impacts on the environment and on human quality life. So I've got some photos I might show you, but essentially during the phase one, there was, in my mind, very little to no consideration given to maintain the trees. Within the buff area, there wasn't a single tree left standing, and this was previously, dense wooded land. I've got some photos I can show you prior to the demo. In addition to kind of not maintaining any trees within the middle of the property, where there's, in my mind, you can see there's an abundant green space there. I don't know why we tore down all the trees. The brochure, the mandate by the Planning and Development Services, that they kind of dictate that's not what we want to see. On the border, and again, I'm going to show you a picture on my property. Every single tree was totally removed and replaced with grass. And I can show you some photos. I heard testimony that these trees were dead. I can show you some photos, aerial photos. Absolutely not. That's not the case. The general standards for a PUD. PUD should be less than 10 acres, right? And I believe the Oldham County Planning and Development Services mandated that because the amount of elements they want to put into a PUD, dictates a large area. I mean, in a 7-acre development, you can't fit new schools. You can't fit, shops and restaurants and multi-use buildings. A PUD shall incorporate multimodal transport elements. Again, that is defined in your document, multimodal. So I'm thinking, cycle paths. Right now, we have limited footpaths or limited sidewalks that don't exit the development, and we also have roads. I mean, I don't believe when whoever wrote this document, believed that sidewalks and a road was adequate. With regards to the waiver for the buffer, so again, I think the concept for a PUD is absolutely awesome. This is not the right property. The plan, it's too small. The plan doesn't align with any of the definitions or the requirements within your own brochure. But what I will say, if the commission does approve the rezoning to a PUD, we would ask that we enforce the 50-foot the buffer. And again, I've got some photos, and I'll hopefully be able to show you the reason why. Is it okay to?
I was going to say, those, there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
So they are in the staff package.
You've got
His
it.
photos are in Mr. Mosley's.
beforehand, maybe.
No, it's that's what it
They're
is.
in letter number 2.
So yeah, photo number 1. This is kind of this is taken maybe 2 weeks ago. This is looking down on that large detention basin right in the middle of the plan. Oh, you want me to do that? There we go. So yeah, this is looking straight down from the detention basin. In my mind, there was ample opportunity to save multiple trees there. And again, this is required or dictated by the brochure that the Oldham County Planning and Development Services put together. Every single tree was removed, gone. Now there may be some comment that, well, we absolutely had to do that because of the way the original plan was. I would then argue that the original plan does not suit a PUD zoning development. The next photo I would like you to see. So this shows the 15-foot landscape buffer between my property. Again, this was previously thick wooded land. I have no idea why the developers did this, but all of the trees were removed and replaced with grass. A little bit frustrating for me. It massively reduced privacy, construction, the noise. I would have liked to see some of the trees, which are decades old, that were torn down, still remain there. Again, I don't know why. I don't know what the thought process was to do that. But again, I think this points to the fact that there was little to no consideration given to preservation of natural resources. The other picture I'd like to show, which is again, I think this is probably more of a subject of the previous TOC, but during the development they hit a lot of bedrock, and I believe that was unanticipated. And they created the development as it is. It currently sits on almost a platform, and we have incredibly steep kind of drop-offs along the side of the property. So another reason why I would like to request a 50-foot buffer perimeter, that's incredibly dangerous. Small child, anyone starts falling down that ravine, they're going to hurt themselves. And I believe by moving the properties further back, you're just a risk of children, pets falling down and injuring themselves or worse. Yep. One time. Okay. So I guess that's my testimony, and I'll let some of my neighbors talk as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Who would like to go next? Let's get your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Terry Clark Wise. I live at 6829 West Highway 22. I am the property, the 1 acre directly in front of this development. I am the 1 acre that has been affected the most by this development. My property is a lower density to Parkview Townhomes, and according to Section 230-010 of the Oldham County Zoning Ordinance, regarding the intent and purpose of a PUD states, a PUD shall be a design alternative, not a density alternative. Density is the sole basis of his application for waiver. He stated himself, they're looking at losing 33 units if you uphold my right to my 50-foot waiver buffer. That's density right there. Back in, he's referencing 2021, the road department came in and asked him to close off an entrance. That was the west entrance. In doing so, per the road department, he added more units, increasing density again. He has given no respect to my property, none. He's asking you to take he's giving his property, his development, what did he say? A 25 foot buffer from their wall to the edge of the property. And he's asking you to grant us only 15 while they're going to gain 25. We're already there. Respect our 50 foot. Granting his waiver does not relieve any hardship, financing that he's facing. It doesn't. But the reduce in landscape buffer greatly affects us. I have children. I have 4 grandchildren that play in my backyard on a regular basis. Their safety should be the utmost concern here. This development comes in the entrance of the property. He surrounds me on the east, the north, and a portion of the west. This is where he's putting his development road, and he's asking to waive that so it could be 15 feet from where my children play. In my letter of opposition, you can clearly see that this developer has left no consideration for my landscape buffer area. He's already constructed a culvert head wall adjoining our property lines. There's no buffer area. This massive structure is 5 foot tall by 12 feet wide. And he's asking you to give me a 3 foot continuous fence on that section of the property? How are you going to screen it when it's 5 feet tall already? And then once you put the road in on top of that, you're going to add another 2 foot. So I'm going to be standing there looking at something that's 7 foot above my property line. One thing I do want to address is he made the comment that they've made the effort to gain the 10 acres. Yes, in the public meeting that he held on the property, he asked to buy my land. I told him, I said, sure, let's sit down, let's run numbers. A few weeks later, he cornered me and says he's been too busy to get back with me with numbers with the holidays and everything. There's been no effort. It was a stall to gain his waiver. That's all it was. I thank you for your time and your consideration. At the end of the day, this is just a business transaction for him. This is where we live. This is our homes. You're asking 76 units to wrap around our home, people driving in and out, and then if you open it up to a PUD, Later down the road, they can expand that and it can become commercial, industrial. Look at the overview of the land. What does it butt up against? It goes me, it goes Walt. I don't know who's directly behind that, but it's Clore Farms. What are they doing with Clore Farms? They're going to be developing all of that. The intent is there. They're going to expand, and they're going to do it at the expense of my entrance. Just grant me my 50-foot waiver. That's all I ask. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak?
Hi, my name's Glenetta Roberts. I live at 6823 West Highway 22 in Crestwood, Kentucky, 40014. I don't know if you can see, where's this? This property right here, this is me. So I have, whoops, now I lost where I was, but anyway, somebody can fix that if they want to.
Can you get us back
Anyway,
to
I was
where
just
we
pointing
were?
out where I was. I agree with my neighbors that spoke that I don't think this property is really, I think he has used what is a PUD, what was the guidelines of a PUD because they work for what he needs, but this property doesn't suit a PUD, I don't think. I don't think it's the right suiting of it. I have a question, and maybe you can answer, Mr. Urban. You guys made a comment, you and your engineer, that it actually is, the construction plans are different from the development plans, and you said the construction plans would take priority. So what's different on the construction plans from the development plans? Because you're asking everybody to go by the development plans, but then you said you're going to go by the construction plans.
If you're
Well,
ready.
the development plan is similar to what was already approved, first of all. From the development plan that was already approved, they have construction plans. They are much more detailed. Those, when I said we're going to put a binding element that the construction plans prevail, the details of things like stormwater management are greater in a construction plan than they are in a development plan. But essentially, this plan is, I'm going to say identical. There may be a couple of things, but it's identical to the previously approved plan.
Okay, but it sounded like it really wasn't, is kind of what I heard.
Well, again, there's more detail in the construction plan. That's the part that I want you to understand, is the construction
okay.
plan has a lot more detail on grading and drainage and location. It's much more specific.
Okay, but it just didn't sound like it's exactly the same thing. So you're asking everybody to go by the development plan, but you're going by the construction plan. So I have so many different notes here. Let's see. I am concerned that if it's rezoned, we observed this with this property because it was rezoned once already and there was a development plan. And that, I know this one has been started, but that one never came to fruition because of economic times. That was back around 2008. The economy affects people all the time, and wise developers and realtors, which I feel like Mr. Shum is, are aware of that, and they try to look forward and know what they're going to anticipate. So in 2008, that development was not ever able to finish building because of the things that happened in the economy. So if you grant him a new kind of zoning, well, what happened then was they granted the zoning for 20 houses, and now you see somebody else came in and put 76 houses in there after that zoning was granted. If Walt, things aren't going good for Walt, he might come back with a different development plan, but then you've already got the PUD zoning, so he doesn't, with the waivers. And so there's just this fear of like a lot of possibilities. It won't really be the way it says it's going to be, I think. I'm concerned. I know that along the one side of my property right here, no, you can't. I'm afraid if I do this, I'll click it again, but right here, this side, it is not even 15 feet. And I'm worried that I'm worried that if you waive the 50 feet, that you're waiving that, and that will always be that way for the zoning. But then if somebody comes in with a different development plan, they might not be held to the 15 feet or less that this development plan is held to, if that makes sense. I do feel like his arguments about the financing are not real legitimate, because I think everybody that knows anything about business knew that those low interest rates were not going to stay that way forever. And like I said, he's been in development and real estate for a long time. I'm sure he's developed condos before and is really familiar with with what the financing things are with condos. I don't think, other than the fact that they couldn't hold them in-house, I don't think a whole lot has changed in the condo financing in the last couple of years since he bought this, except for the rates and possibly the fact that they're not holding them in-house. Trying to see if there's anything else that I haven't said that I wanted to say. Oh, I think the fact that he says there's not much difference between, his attorney says there's not much difference between 7.2 acres and 10 acres. If we had 10 acres, there'd be room for a 50-foot perimeter probably. That probably would make up the difference. I also agree with my neighbors who said, you know, there was absolutely no attempt to save. It was a heavily wooded area with some very substantial, huge trees in there, and there was no attempt to save any of them. I'm afraid, I tried to save the ones on my line, and I'm afraid they're going to all die because, and actually his person who was taking the trees down, I had them talk to me, and he said, yeah, yours should survive. They're big trees. They should be fine. But I don't think he knew that Walt was going to cut down, I'm sorry, I keep messing with that thing, but along all of my borders, he has dug down substantially, the shortest point maybe 3 or 4 feet, like a cutoff down, and on another, in the back side, it's more like, I don't know, 6 or 7 feet. And so any roots that were down in there are damaged and taken away from anything from that line back. So I do think that the trees have not been respected, and I don't see any indication that he will do that in the future, even though that's a big part of what the PUD is also. Let's see. It concerns me that some of the wording in this is that they contemplate keeping a 15-foot perimeter barrier. I would hope it would be something very substantial. If you're going to waive 50 feet, that you would make it more than just a contemplation that they're going to keep a 15 feet, that it would have to be something pretty ironclad that they're going to have to do that. It doesn't really bother me, but there's something in his plan says that there are no bodies of water, but there is a big runoff through there, so there is a big body of water in there. That's probably everything. Let's see. That's all I can think of at the moment. I probably have other things, but that's all I can think of at the moment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Anyone else like to speak?
I'm sorry, I wanted to address one more issue. The entrance to this development. According back into what was previously June 16th of 21, a letter from Oldham County Planning and Zoning, Amy Alvey, addressed to Mr. Vinson, stated, an access easement agreement will be required for the property at 6829 West Highway 22 to use the private road from the development road to access their property. As of today, there still is no agreement in place. I cross his development road coming off of 22. I cross over it to enter the front of my home. I have to cross his development road to go check my mail for the day. So before any waivers get issued, I think there's some clarification that needs to be addressed on what has and hasn't been done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
We'll have the opportunity for closing statements, right?
I'm sorry, I'm going to need you.
We'll have the opportunity for closing statements, correct?
You will, yes. Please, Ryan.
I just want to direct everybody's attention to the back of their packets, where we did receive 10 adjoining property owner letters of opposition. Some of them did speak today. In addition, if you want, I'll put up on the overhead 4 additional ones that I have received since then, or I can just submit these to the record, whichever you all prefer. Or I could read them, although I'd prefer one of the first 2 options.
Preference of the commission.
Commission, have a preference? You want to see them, you want to hear? Yep, moving along, okay.
All right, I'll just give these.
Thank you. All right. Moving into questions from the commission. Who would like to start? Mr. Falvey?
I just have one. The lady who said the 1 acre in front, how tall is the fence between the property that is planned?
I need you to be here at the podium, please.
And the question might be for them, but how tall is the fence between your property and hers? I think one comment was 3 feet, and I thought it was 7 feet.
Yeah, I don't know where the 3 feet came from.
Yeah.
What has been approved with the landscape plan is a privacy fence of 7 to 8 feet.
That's what I thought.
In addition to that, there will be trees planted as well.
Yep.
And that's all been approved with the landscape plan.
And I just
Now,
wanna
now
make-
it's not been installed, obviously, because we're still under construction. That'd be one of the last things that'll happen as finished grade
Right.
occurs.
And I just want her aware of that. So it's going to be a 7 or 8 foot fence with landscaping also.
I'd like to clarify that because that 7 to 8 foot is on the west entrance with Williams Gate and on the back with Mr. Mosley. There is no 7 or 8 foot agreement proposed between the back of my home and his road. What Amy Alvey stated was a 3 foot high continuous screen.
That is not was approved with the landscape plan. The landscape plan that I submitted clearly shows the privacy fence on both sides of the entrance road and on the north side of her property. Anywhere where the road is closer than 25 feet to the property line, not only do you have to install a 7 to 8 foot privacy fence, but you also have to meet the landscape buffer requirements as well. And that is of record with the landscape plan.
Mr. Fisher, can you help clarify for us, please?
I'll just direct your attention to your staff packet. I had put in there the Phase 1 approved landscape plan that was approved by me in February. And if you can see to the rear of Ms. Clark's property, it says install 7 foot tall privacy fence. And then in addition, you'll see 4 trees that are on there. So those are things at the end of the project. When they go to get their bond release, I have to go out there and physically count trees and be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 privacy fence before anything gets released in regards to that. So I just wanted to note that. That's the Phase 1 landscape plan that's been approved. That's in your packet.
Thank you, Ryan. Mr. Falvey, does that clarify for you?
Yes.
Thank you. Additional questions, Mr. Falvey? No? Mr. Hampton, Mr. Heffling, I'll get right to you. I've got Mr. Hampton first.
I just want to satisfy myself on this. If we do nothing or deny this particular application, the development goes on as is. Is that correct? It's already been approved.
Let me address that. If you do nothing and we can't sell these townhomes, then you've created a rental situation for us, which we are trying desperately
I understand that,
to avoid.
but it's still been approved and it's can go forward if so deemed.
It has been approved and can go forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Hampton?
No.
Keep going.
May I?
Please,
Yeah.
please.
And I'll have to have a little leniency here as far as testifying. I'm not trying to testify. I'm trying to find something out. I'll ask counsel this.
State it in form of a question.
I'll try to.
Please.
When is this commission's job to worry about financing and interest rates. I just didn't know that was under our purview.
That's a great question, and the short answer, it's actually not the job of the commission to worry
Thank
about
you.
financing rates.
Thank you.
Mr. Hampton, anything additional? Mr. Halfling?
Very similar question. If you continue with your construction with the R4, what will your buffer zone be?
It will be as required in the R4 zoning. The landscape perimeter buffer area is 15 feet, and the building setback, which means no building will be built any closer than 25 feet to the property lines.
So if we were to approve it or not approve it, everything would be the same.
Absolutely, 100%.
Mr. Halfling, anything additional? Other questions? Ms. Nasser?
Have any of these units that have started being built been sold?
The short answer is no. The long answer is that because of MSD and Louisville Water, we've been 18 months getting the final utilities approved. So up until about 9 months ago, we didn't start working on that. There are no contracts on any of these units. They've not been sold, nor do I have anyone telling me there's going to be contracts on these units.
Another question for you. Do you have any covenants and restrictions regarding rentals of these units?
We're not going to allow Airbnbs on these units, but I don't think, or short-term rentals. In terms of rental units on an annual basis, we're going to have to contemplate that. It's just the current market condition we're in. We have 8 units up in the air and have not started additional buildings at this time because of the economic condition.
Ms. Nasser?
One more on financing. If I can have one of the group.
Come on.
Okay. Can you elaborate more on the financing when it is, as is right now, versus if it were to go to a townhome or a fee simple?
Okay, he stated he has 8 units up so far. Oh, sorry. 8 units already started. Out of those 8, he has to have 4 of those units sold for us to give them the 5th unit a loan for when it's stated as a condo. And if it's a PUD, we could do the very first unit because they own that land underneath them. They own the roof above them. If it's a condo, if you're going to buy this, the 5th condo, your interest rate, let's say the interest rate stays at 7. Your interest rate is going to be 7.875 because it's a condo. It doesn't matter if you have perfect credit or not. It's because of the risk that the market's taking on the condo. So if it's an affordable home, you get somebody that's making, $80,000 a year, they're not going to be able to afford the 7.875, where they can afford 7%, because you have a lower homeowners association dues monthly, also. So that plays in effect is part of being able to qualify for the mortgage. $250 versus $150 a month.
And one more question. On the initial time we sat down and looked at this, was there consideration for this to be a PUD zoning change instead of an R4?
No, there wasn't. We didn't talk about that at that time with the commission because financing was favorable. And again, what they're not saying is the liquidity issue with the banks has the greatest effect on in-house financing, which was going to be at least 50% of the available financing for our buyers. So condo regime versus fee simple at that point in time wasn't an issue. I don't think anybody anticipated the rapid rise that we've seen in the last 2 years. Still possible to overcome, but what isn't possible to overcome is the reserves required in the banking business for them to make in-house loans. And these are not the most preferential loans, so they're looking elsewhere for their loans.
Mr. Finney?
I guess Mr. Swansburg, I'm not really sure. can you explain or give me a reason why we should approve this as a PUD when it doesn't really follow the intent and purpose of our PUD? The only real thing it's after is a method of financing. So, in other words, if we go for the intent and purpose of a PUD, you're not there. You're looking for a financial reason, and I understand that, but as a commission, we're not following our intent and purpose of the PUD. Can you explain?
Sure, and I understand. I appreciate that question at the end of the day. One of the things I would submit is that the justification for, or one of the reasons why we are in fact coming here asking for this change is very much has been discussed, the financing issue, and ensuring that at the end of the day, the development can proceed as originally contemplated in terms of having 76 units that are in fact purchased by individuals and is again in a high quality environment. What we are actually submitting to you is that the proposed plan, except for the 2 waivers that we are asking for, in fact, do meet the requirements for a PUD. And we've heard some statements from individuals today about why it doesn't. And quite frankly, I was going to prepare that as a rebuttal, but I'm happy to address that now if you would like to do that. In terms of the PUD and some of the, I want to address actually some of the specifics that were actually brought up, if I can, in response to your question, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay at this point. This may dovetail into a little bit of the rebuttal, but I think it's fair to respond to that question. We talk about, for example, mixed land use at the end of the day, and I appreciate this being up here. I think this will allow me to do this. Okay, so this particular image that's right here on your screen is actually pretty illustrative right now. This again is the envisions, generally speaking, and as Mr. Urban's already talked about, for example, there may be some very much detail issues in terms of construction that might not be indicative in this particular plan, but as of right now, there is that 15-foot buffer that's illustrated in green around that area. A PUD requires you to have mixed use, and what we think of and what was talked about in a lot of ways, although it is not in fact required, is this notion of a Norton Commons subdivision. All the ordinance requires is a mixed use of some kind. That can in fact include both residential and recreational in addition to commercial. It doesn't have to be a mix of residential and commercial. It doesn't have to be a mix of residential and some other type of use. It just has to be a mixed use. What this illustrates from our perspective, what I wanted to address in this part, is that this highlights for you what we would argue is very much illustrative of a mixed use. So in addition to the blue, which is all residential, there's actually the open green space, which was talked about, well, it might be limited, but there are in fact restrictions on that on deeds that actually allow each of these open spaces to be used for recreational purposes. Now, you may not build necessarily a playground on it or put a workout facility that might be on there in terms of pull-up bars or whatever that someone might contemplate in that regard, but they are in fact open spaces that are able to be used for recreational purposes. So even if in the absence of anything else, you've already got a mixed use in terms of the property for residential and recreational, which both of which are identified as absolutely appropriate uses of land under the PUD designation. So that's one issue I wanted to make sure we address, notwithstanding the fact that potentially at the end of the day, any number of individuals could actually run businesses out of their homes, which is a absolutely commonplace thing to do now across the United States. And in fact, if you look on Google Maps at the Williamsgate, the subdivision next to it, you'll see that at least a few of those homes over there actually are identified as business locations for individuals as well, in addition to it being residential. And so there are notwithstanding again the fact that there are already 2 very obvious mixed-use purposes identified on that map that can actually be, that comport with the PUD, there could be other reasons, other possible ways that people use the land that are absolutely reasonable and understandable to be used on this. So that's one issue in terms of PUD requirements. So again, we believe it already meets the standard for a PUD. Second, when we talk about open recreational space was another issue that brought up. I just talked about that. Again, there's open green space. There's space that's not technically designated as open space in between residential units. That is all open space that in fact can be used by individuals for that mixed use purpose. And there is in fact open recreational space on there. Schools, there was a discussion about schools and whether or not you want to build a school on a PUD and how you have to have enough space for a school. The ordinance doesn't require you to build a school in a PUD. It doesn't. And quite frankly, if you're going to have the 10-acre minimum for a PUD, you couldn't build a school in addition to a housing and a mixed-use commercial area. You just don't have enough space. But that's what the ordinance says you need for a minimum of a PUD is that 10 acres. But you can't do all the stuff they're talking about now. And in fact, the ordinance doesn't require it. It talks about that as an idealistic end goal, but it's not in fact a requirement for a PUD. And so we would submit that that's not actually part of what the ordinance requires, is to do things like put a school in the middle of a subdivision here. Trees, and there actually were photos that talked about it, and we've got some photos, and in terms of rebuttal, we can talk about that. You know,
So it's commission questions right now. Let's not creep too far into rebuttal.
I apologize.
but-
What I wanted to do, Mr. Chairman, was respond. The question to
Right.
me was about meeting the elements of a PUD, and that's a fair point. Let me save the trees.
Fair enough, thank you. So I
There
do
was-
have.
I'm going to interrupt.
let's-
I'm going to interrupt you because you're going way too deep into the PUD, and I think there's a much simpler answer that everybody's going to understand.
Okay.
And I'm going to testify, and I've asked Mr. Baxter if I explained without asking a question if that was okay, and his response was yes. Just so everybody can understand, everybody knows this is a previously approved development plan under the R4 zoning classification. It's under construction. There are construction plans that have been approved. It's under construction. The problem, and the only reason you're here today with anything, is because financing changed. Financing is not our issue. The reality is, we sat down with the applicant and we went through the regulations to try to come up with a way of providing fee simple lots. Fee simple means each unit is on its own lot. In the R4 zoning classification, the minimum lot size could not be accomplished. You couldn't put what was already approved, and in the case of the ones that are already built, you couldn't divide up the land in a way where the minimum lot size would be met. We went through every zoning classification. The only one that made any kind of opportunity to salvage this development as proposed and offer it for sale, not for rental, was the PUD. That's the only reason the PUD zoning classification was ever selected, because it gives you the flexibility to create your own lot size, not to increase density, not to make things different, but to make it so that it would fit under what was already approved. So the explanation, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but this long explanation of the PUD and complying, it was the only zoning classification that would allow this development to move forward as it was already approved, understanding that now that it's under construction, there are concerns from the neighbors. And in that, there are requirements, like the 50-foot landscape buffer. Those wouldn't exist if he could have fit in an R4A. It wouldn't have existed. It doesn't exist in the R4 or any other zoning classification. So really, the PUD is the only way to offer this opportunity to move forward with a previously approved development plan and be able to be financed. It's that simple. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Urban.
I appreciate that.
All right, Mr. Finney? Anyone else? Questions? All right, Mr. Swansburg, don't sit. We're up for rebuttal, please.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. Again, I'm not going to go over the information that I've already talked about as part of the rebuttal that I talked about. And in my initial attempt, Commissioner Finney, to answer your question, I appreciate that opportunity. I don't want to rehash all those other elements. The one that I did want to address, again, just in the context of what a PUD requires, and the reason why I think it's important to talk about what a PUD requires is because you all need a legal justification for making that approval. You can't just arbitrarily say it's a PUD. There actually is requirements for it. And so I want to make sure that we're at least explaining from our perspective why at the end of the day this proposal as it is in fact meets that requirement, so that if the group decides they want to move forward with that, they have a legal justification for doing so. The multimodal transportation issue was discussed in terms of, roads versus sidewalks versus the accessibility to the street. We talked about, again, as a comparator, Norton Commons. And please don't hold it against me, but I live in Norton Commons. And there are no sidewalks in Norton Commons going in on Chamberlain Lane or going in on 22 into Norton Commons itself. There are sidewalks within Norton Commons. That is absolutely correct. But there are not sidewalks on the roadway leading up to it. There are leading up to the interstate. And they've just now finished building one that's right in front of that Brownsboro Health Center on the southern side of the interstate on Chamberlain Lane. But there are no sidewalks otherwise. So in terms of discussion of having access out on Kentucky 22 down to Crestwood proper, the PUDs that we talk about contemplating don't actually require that anyway. There are, in fact, internal multimodal transportation types that are contemplated, that are in fact part of, and there's a discussion about contemplated. When I say contemplated, what I mean by that is that they are in fact part of the plan. Contemplating it's just incorporated within it. So I apologize if that has caused confusion for anybody. It's not an aspirational thing. It is in fact part of the plan. But there are actually different types of transportation incorporated within this particular plan. One is roadways, obviously. The other are sidewalks. One of the things that we've talked about, it's not obvious necessarily in this, but it is obvious in the other plan, is that there's actually at the entranceway, there's actually a little bit of a road indentation, which potentially could down the road be a bus stop. It's not noticeable on this particular one. It is part of the one that I showed, and the paper's not here with me, the one that's in your plan with the red 50-foot buffer actually has what looks to be at the entranceway there on the south side toward Kentucky 22, a little area that looks like a turnaround that potentially is an area that can be used for a bus stop down the road at some point, if that is something that the county, the city, et cetera, want to do. So there are in fact plans for this built into the development and construction plan that contemplate different types of transportation, which again, I want to make sure I address as part of that. Density issue, Mr. Urban did a good job of at least articulating what that is. This is not, the plan as it currently stands is already approved for 76 units as it currently stands. In terms of density, an R4 designation actually would allow the developer to add more units than there are currently contemplated if it were able to fit within the acreage. R4 would actually allow them to put more in. But there are fewer than what R4 allows them to do as it stands right now. So again, 76 units, they're already approved. And again, the project has already been approved moving forward. One of the things, and this may be more of a misunderstanding, I want to make sure I talk about this, is the perimeter around the 15-foot perimeter is already approved. It's already in existence as part of the development. The 50-foot perimeter that we're talking about is one that is required by a PUD that we're asking you to waive and allow us just to keep the existing 15-foot perimeter as it's already been approved and as it's already being incorporated as part of the construction. This is not a 50-foot barrier that we're taking away from anybody. We have a 15-foot barrier that is in fact baked into the cake here. And that includes on top of the landscaping 15-foot, where we talked about as multiple areas where fencing is going to be added. Those are not aspirational. Those are not things that we might think about. Those are in fact part of the plan. That west side with the Williams Gate, we talked about the area with Ms. Clark's property, for example, the entranceway where Ms. Roberts has got, the northeastern corner where the Mosley's property, they talked about before. All of that, in fact, has fencing in addition to the landscaping that is going to be part of the plan. It's already in it. So I just want to make sure that that is clear as well. And again, we talk about respect for trees at this point. I will concede to you all that this is under construction. And in order to build, there are trees that have to be, in fact, be cut down in order to do it. This is not a farm to begin with. It would be wonderful if it were a farm, you didn't have to, but this was a wooded area to begin with. And the approval was for a development that's already been discussed multiple times here. And as part of that, there in fact has to be some trees taken down. But there have been measures, contrary to what we've heard, there have in fact been measures to keep as much of that as possible. There have in fact been dead trees taken down. That's a fact. But as you even noticed in some of the photos that were shown by Mr. Mosley, for example, there are still trees around it. And again, that doesn't take into account the reality that there is, in fact, additional landscaping to be put in as part of the construction. The builders are going to put in more landscaping. Mr. Van Zandt told you that. That is, in fact, going to continue to be the case. That's not changing. So in terms of, I guess, respect for the land, respect for the neighbors, I appreciate and I understand why folks who are joining this property are upset and have concerns. I certainly understand why that is. I just want to make sure at the end of the day, the commission's fully educated as to what actually this plan does, what we are actually asking the commission to do at the end of the day, and that we believe at the end of the day, the testimony that you've heard here, the plan as contemplated meets the requirements, legally speaking, for a PUD, and allows this project to continue to move forward as was contemplated back in 2021. And at this point, Mr. Chairman, I think that's all I have for rebuttal purposes. Obviously, I reserve the right and will be more than happy to make a closing statement at the end. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Swansburg. For those who've offered opposition testimony and questions, you have an opportunity to present rebuttal. So at this point of the hearing, there is no new evidence, no new testimony to be presented, simply rebuttal of what has been on the record thus far. Okay?
Correct. I understand that there's a 15-foot buffer waiver in place. That doesn't change. Circumstances for him have changed as far as financial reasons to ask you for a PUD. Well, our rights have changed then also. If a PUD is being asked, our rights have changed. We are now entitled to that 50-foot landscape buffer. And taking it away, it only adds to him. It changes his density if you grant that. If you grant him his 15-foot waiver, he's going to gain 33 units. If you uphold the regulation, he's going to lose 33 units. He's going to lose 33 units if you keep our rights in place. Both of our circumstances have changed. We both have the right to ask that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just, I guess my final comment, and I reiterate, I think the PUD is an absolutely amazing concept for Oldham County. I implore you not to allow this development to tarnish the concept or set the precedent for future developers to misuse or abuse this zoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one final comment. Council talked about the fact that this was zoned R4 when the amount of houses were allowed in there. He also talked about the fact that under a PUD with these fee simple things, they could not put that many in there if they were fee simple on R4, not this many would fit. So it is asking for both. I feel like it's asking for having your cake and eating it too, kind of.
All right. Anyone else? We will move into final statements now. Anyone from those providing opposition testimony wish to provide a final statement? Being none, Mr. Swansburg, you're up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, we've had a very spirited, very good, I think, discussion today about this particular proposal. I appreciate all of the questions and the comments that have been made as part of this, and the opportunity, quite frankly, for us to also share our side of the story and the reason why we are here today in front of you. Mr. Urban did a great job, quite frankly, of articulating way better than I would in terms of why this was even a concept that we came up with, and that was obviously, as we mentioned, in consultation with the staff and trying to come up with a workable way to make this project a reality. A project that I will remind was actually originally contemplated and approved unanimously by this body back in 2021. Again, docket number PZ-21-014. During that time, there were additional requirements placed upon the developers at that point in terms of how they used the land adjacent to the property owners. Those have all been incorporated as part of the plan, which is at this point approved and in fact ongoing as we speak. Yes, in terms of additional justification, the housing market and the rise in interest rate and financing issues is absolutely the fundamental reason why we are asking this, as opposed to just allowing us to go forward with the project and doing it as is, and what we would have done otherwise in the context of additional construction. But I want to just make sure that I reiterate something here at the end of the day. KRS 100.213 sub 1. That's the statute that governs when, or the basis under which a commission may in fact consider and approve a request for an amendment to a zoning map. And that says, quote, before any amendment is granted, the planning commission must find that the map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. I mentioned before that in fact the comprehensive plan here in Oldham County identifies 85 objectives broken into 7 major categories. And I want to just, again, highlight the basis which gives you all a legal footing upon which to make this determination today, setting aside all the discussion about the specific requirements for PUD, which we, again, believe we are actually met and have, in fact, discussed at length here today. But on top of that, land use objective LU2 of the comprehensive plan encourages county leaders, and I would argue, in addition to this commission, as a county leader, to encourage the preservation and develop of a range of housing opportunities across the county. A range of housing opportunities across the county. Create that environment. That's what land use objective LU-2 of the comprehensive plan states. We talked about the fact that this particular development is going to create options for individuals in this county by allowing for lower cost but still high quality development for attached townhomes located here in Crestwood. Land use objective LU-2-3 sub 2 of the comprehensive plan says that the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations should provide incentives to encourage private sector investment in the development of a variety of housing types. Again, that is in the comprehensive plan. That is what county leaders, including this commission as a county leader, are able to look at and to rely upon in making these types of determinations. Again, the development constitutes a substantial investment by private sector actors to create a unique housing type, high quality, affordable single-family homes that are desperately needed in this county. And finally, again, the zoning ordinance sets forth various objectives for PUD zones, including promotion of design creativity and excellence that will result in high quality development, combination and coordination of architectural styles, building forms and heights, and structural visual relationships within an environment that allows for mixing of different land uses and building types, including recreational uses, in an innovative and functionally efficient manner, and the promotion of efficient use of land resulting in networks of utilities, streets, and other infrastructures, features that maximize the allocation of fiscal and natural resources, among others. That's within the comprehensive zoning ordinance. That is, in fact, encompassed within this very compact 7.2 acres that we are talking about and asking you all to look at today. The master plan report and development report provided to the commission by the applicant, which incorporates by reference the original 2021 plan, we believe identifies and addresses each and every requirement for a PUD zone under the Oldham County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. We would ask you all, therefore, to consider the 3 motions that we've talked about today. I appreciate, again, Mr. Chairman, your time, members of the commission, your time, as well as the individuals who have already spoken. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Swansberg. All right. Good. Anything? I thought you were getting ready to tell me something. Well, what's the favor of the commission? Do you want to take a break now or after deliberating? Let's deliberate. All right.
I have a question.
All right.
Okay.
Have a
If we
question.
vote first to grant the waiver and we don't grant the change to PUD.
That's not the way we're doing this, yeah. The way it's in the staff report is not in order. The first one is the zoning map amendment.
Okay.
Yep. That's correct. Yep.
Well, let's give Mr.
Well, it's
Urban a
just not
chance
in- it's just
to
not
frame
in
this up.
order.
Okay?
Yeah, yeah. The order is, if you don't approve the zoning map amendment, none of the other things matter.
All right. So Is that as much as you need, or do you need to give us a little bit more?
Well, just it's on page, see, the pages don't seem to be numbered. There's a zoning map amendment, about the third piece of paper into your staff report. There's a
Up here, please.
There's a motion to either recommend to the city of Crestwood approval or denial. I highly encourage you to fill in the blanks. Regardless of what your motion is, you've got to put statements in there which would substantiate your motion. There are no conditions or any other things other than your consideration of the zoning map amendment. That would be from R4 to PUD.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Any questions? Ms. Nasser?
I have one technical question. This is probably a Jim Urban question. You may not be able to answer it now. But do we have any other fee simples, and are they in PUD zoning within the county, or are they?
Well, I'm going to give you the best example. I live in one. If you remember back in the housing adjustment of 07, 8, 9, this same situation occurred, that they couldn't get financing for condominiums for either construction and or sale. And actually, there were two that I can remember very quickly, Cedar Point Village and Rivers Landing. Rivers Landing had two duplex, or four actually, duplex houses, 2 units per building, that were approved under the old condominium regime, and they had to come in and create fee simple. Now, in those cases, I forget whether it was R4 or R4A, because the minimum lot size was used, and we actually did that. The Planning Commission approved a zoning map amendment so that those developments could move forward. So the short answer is yes. We have examples of that the commission has done in the past.
Anything else? Wheels turning. Sam, do you have a question?
So what were they approved as back then?
What specific zoning classifications?
Yes, sir.
Well, again, they could, because there had been a previously approved development plan, and in both of those cases, like this one, construction had already started. The difference was that they used R4 or R4A because they could create individual lots. So in both cases where there were attached units, they were able to use a zero lot line, and we granted variances for a zero lot line, so zero setback, because they were attached units. And they were able to, similar to this plan where you see the red blocks, those are actually the individual lots. But in the case of the other two examples I gave, they actually were able to meet the minimum lot size. When we sat down with this applicant, none of those scenarios worked. Even if they extended it all the way out into the street, there are certain the configuration of what was already approved, they could not get the minimum lot size. So we looked at even PRD, which is planned residential development, and that didn't fit because there's minimum lot size. So the PUD, and that's the reason they chose this zoning classification, is it allows for all those things that are in the brochure that Mr. Mosley talked about in terms of alternate type design. But really, it's the only way for this to move forward and have fee simple lots.
All right. Any additional questions? Okay, the floor will be open for a motion regarding the zoning map amendment request. Mr. Hampton.
I'm going to try to do this. Mr. Urban can certainly help me along. Concerning docket PZ-23-015, I make a motion to deny this zoning map amendment It's the R4, it's already been approved, and this change doesn't meet the PUD objectives.
Mr. Baxter?
Mr. Hampton, you are looking at the,
That's what they said to do.
so you're under this part, right?
Right.
that-
You'd have to state some of the reasons in that it does not comply with the comprehensive plan, existing zoning classification is appropriate, or there have not been major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature.
I used the middle one.
You have to fill in the blank where it says because.
It doesn't meet the PUD objectives.
Okay.
That's what I said.
It's an adequate motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Winters, thank you.
So just a reminder to the commissioners, the motion is to deny. If you support that motion to deny, then when you're called upon, your answer is yes. If you do not support the motion to deny, then your answer is no. It's that opposite.
Okay, everybody clear? All right, we'll move into roll call vote.
Mr. Finney?
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Elder?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
No.
Mr. Falvey?
No.
Ms. Walzer?
No.
Mr. Winters?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Mr. Halfling?
No.
Ms. Nasser?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. So our motion to deny has failed on a vote of 5-3 with an additional one abstaining. So we will move back into reconsideration. We must come up with a,
Well, you can,
or do we need to?
you could have the same motion, or you could have a different motion.
All right. Council, anything to add here?
Mr. Chairman, I think the floor is open for somebody else to make a
All right.
motion.
Floor will go back open regarding the zoning map amendment. Mr. Falvey?
We'll give it a shot.
Thank you, sir.
I move for approval of the waiver to the PUD.
No, it's a zoning map amendment.
The zoning map amendment.
I'm sorry, the zoning map amendment. I approve
So this will be a recommendation to the city of Crestwood.
recommendation
There you
for
go.
approval. I believe under LU-2 of the comprehensive plan, it looks for a variety of housing. This change in zoning, I think, would help provide that due to market conditions that have changed. It does make this pre-approved plan that we approved last year to move forward, and I think it would offer a better opportunity to for that to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Falvey. Mr. Baxter?
It's an adequate motion.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Mr. Halfling? Discussion?
Well, just to make sure everybody, now, if the motion is to approve, so if you support the motion to approve, your answer is yes. If you do not support the motion to approve, your answer is no. So that's different than the last time.
We'll move into roll call vote. Oh,
Not on a zoning map amendment. Nope, that's later.
Ms. Edgar, we'll move into roll call vote.
Ms. Nasser?
Yes.
Mr. Winters?
No.
Ms. Walzer?
Yes.
Mr. Halfling?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
No.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Mr. Finney?
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Elder?
No.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. 531.
Yeah.
Motion to approve the recommendation of a zoning map amendment, to recommend to the city of Crestwood a zoning map amendment, has been approved by a vote of 5-3 with 1 abstaining. Mr. Urban.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Baxter.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to
Fair enough.
interject something at this point. So now, the zoning map, the recommendation about the zoning map approval has been approved, which means that your position can change at this point because we're dealing with a separate issue. So you can either support or you can be opposed to the things that Mr. Urban's going to talk about. Just because you voted one way before doesn't mean you have to vote the same way now, because the law of the case, so to speak, at this point, is there's a recommended approval. So now, assuming that that is the case, you can change your vote one way or the other.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Everybody clear? All right.
Okay, so the next things to consider are, first, the waiver for the minimum lot size, which is required in our regulations under the PUD zoning of 10 acres. They have 7.2, so the waiver request is 2.8 acres. In the fourth page of your staff report, there is a motion for either approval or denial. Again, I encourage you to read those statements and fill in the blanks in your motion. The only potential condition of approval, if there's a motion for approval, is that the waiver shall only apply to the plan reviewed at the July 25th, 2023 Planning Commission public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Urban.
This is, again, waiver on the minimum lot size.
Minimum lot size waiver is now the question on the floor. Mr. Finney?
Just a question, so if they don't get approval, then where does that end, where does that end up with the PUD?
You mean at the city of Crestwood?
Yeah,
So if the city of Crestwood chooses to overturn your recommendation for approval, then it negates all of this. But your recommendation so far is approval. So we always send that forward with the development plan.
right, but if you don't approve the minimum lot size,
Well, you don't have a development plan. If that's what you're asking, right? Yep,
so then you really don't have a PUD.
that's correct. So the recommendation would then go to the city of Crestwood recommending approval of the PUD. And if they uphold that, and we've denied it, but they've changed the zoning map, then it would have to come back here for this all over again, for not the zoning map, but for the waiver and the development plan approval. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Further questions?
Yeah, is everybody clear on that? So the question is, what if we deny the waiver? Well, again, if the city of Crestwood changes the zoning map to PUD, they would have to come back here for these same three things. That would be the waiver of the lot size, the landscape buffer waiver, and then ultimately the development plan approval.
Okay. Everyone clear? Floor is open for a motion regarding the minimum lot size waiver as requested. Ms. Nasser, do I see you making a move there?
Yeah, I'm making a move.
You have the floor.
All right. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minimum size waiver, section 230-20, number 2. Waiver requested of 2.8 acres. This waiver is consistent with the plan previously approved. It is not changing the density of that plan in compliance with the prior approval regulations. This does have the, I do want to include the binding elements, that this shall only apply to the plan reviewed at the July 25th, 2023 Planning Commission public hearing. And do we have any other binding elements?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Nasser.
Yeah.
Mr. Baxter?
Ms. Nasser, can you look in the staff report, and there was a couple of bases to approve the waiver, either A or B or both. Do you feel that either of those are applicable in the current situation?
I do feel like that the changes in the financial situation do create a hardship on the sale of these properties, and the change, the type of the property that they are is not going to change, but the financial changes will help in selling those properties due to the hardships of the area that we're going through right now.
That's adequate, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Thank you, Ms. Nasser. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Mr. Falvey? Thank you. Discussion. We'll move into roll call vote. Ms. Edgar?
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Mr. Elder?
No.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Halfling?
Yes.
Mr. Winters?
No.
Ms. Nasser?
Yes.
Ms. Walzer?
No.
Mr. Finney?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
No.
Thank you, ma'am. Motion to approve the minimum lot size waiver as requested has been approved on a vote of 5-4.
The next item is consideration of the landscape buffer requirement, section 230-020, number 4. The minimum lot size when adjoining a lower density intensity zoning district is 50 feet. The proposed landscape buffer is 15 feet, so the waiver is 35 feet. On page 5 of your staff report, there are motions for, sample motions for either approval or denial. Again, I encourage you to look at those in your motion and fill in the blanks on the considerations that are in there. The potential condition of approval, again, is the waiver shall only apply to the plan reviewed at the July 25th, 2023 Planning Commission public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Questions? The floor will be open for a motion on the landscape buffer waiver as requested.
Hello.
Mr. Hampton.
On the question of the landscape buffer, I move to deny because the impairment of desired general development of the neighborhood and the community as proposed by the comprehensive plan from the 50 feet to 15 feet.
Mr. Baxter.
Let me back up. Let me insert, the design innovations of this case will not achieve the basic objectives of the regulation because impairment of the desirable general development of the neighborhood and the community as proposed by the comprehensive plan.
Adequate motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Ms. Davis, thank you.
Okay, so this is, again, a reminder, it's a motion to deny. So if you want to support that motion, your answer is yes. If you do not support the motion, your answer is no.
Everybody clear? All right, we'll move into roll call vote. Ms. Edgar.
Ms. Davis. Ms. Walzer.
Yes.
Mr. Elder.
Yes.
Ms. Nasser.
No.
Mr. Winters.
Yes.
Mr. Hampton.
Yes.
Mr. Halfling.
No.
Mr. Finney.
No.
Mr. Falvey.
No.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. And the motion to deny the landscape buffer waiver request has been denied on a vote of 5 to 4. We will move back into motions on the landscape buffer waiver as requested, and the floor is open.
Okay.
Ms.
Here we go.
Nasser?
Here we go.
You again?
Yep, it's me again. Make a motion to approve the landscape buffer waiver request for a 35 feet waiver with proposed buffer of 15 feet based on the fact that this was the previously accepted and proposed landscape buffer of 15 feet, and it would create a undue hardship in creating a 50-foot buffer in these circumstances by reducing the number of buildable units.
Thank you, Ms. Nasser. Mr. Baxter?
Adequate motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have a motion
Also
on-
want to
Please.
add the binding elements stated by Jim Urban.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Mr. Falvey, thank you. We'll move into discussion. Roll call vote. Ms. Edgar, please. And before you get started, once again,
No.
the rules have flipped, right? This is a motion to approve, so
If you support the motion to approve, your answer is yes. If you do not support the motion to approve, your answer is no.
thank you. Ms. Edgar?
Ms. Walzer.
No.
Ms. Nasser,
Yes.
Mr. Winters,
No.
Mr. Hampton,
No.
Mr. Halfling,
Yes.
Mr. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Elder,
No.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Thank you. And the motion to approve the landscape buffer waiver has been approved on a vote of 5 to 4. Mr. Urban.
All right, so the last thing is that the preliminary development plan, I guess it's about on the 6th page of your staff report. There are sample motions for either approval or denial. There are a list of potential conditions of approval. The approval applies only to plan presented at the July 25th, 2023 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing and includes all conditions of approval and binding elements included in the July 27th, 2021 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing, approved minutes, and issued and recorded restrictions of land use in the case of PZ-21-014. The second one is that the preliminary development plan must comply with all established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements at the time of approval. The third is the cumulative phasing plan shall limit the number of building permits issued to, and this is the number of building units issued to be 18 per year, beginning with the record plat. The fourth one is all internal roads are private and shall remain private and shall not be accepted into the county road or city road network system. And then the fifth one is that the previously approved construction plan shall take precedence over the development plan for the details of construction.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Questions? All right, if none, the floor will be open for a motion on the development plan. Ms. Nasser.
Make a motion to approve the development plan stated in docket PZ 23-015. This development plan is in compliance with the future use plan for the area. It is in compliance with the same as the previously accepted plan. I also include the binding elements as stated by Jim Irwin, referencing today and past meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Nasser. Mr.
Ms.
Baxter?
Nasser, are there any provisions of the comprehensive plan that you feel like it complies with, any of those objectives? And I would tell you that Mr. Schwansberg, on page 2 of one of the things that he gave you, points to a couple sections he thought applied, but obviously those are up to you.
I do feel like it complies with the residential land use for the area and the market conditions for the area.
Can you incorporate those into your motion?
And I would like to incorporate those into my motion for approval.
You have an adequate motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Do I have a second? Ms. Davis, thank you. Ms. Edgar, we'll move into a roll call vote. This is for a motion to approve the development plan.
Mr. Elder,
No.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Halfling,
Yes.
Mr. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Winters,
Yes.
Ms. Nasser,
Yes.
Ms. Walzer.
No.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. Motion for approval of the development plan has passed on a vote of 7 to 2. And we're going to take a break. Before you guys go, I need to know where you are with respect to the last item on the docket. How are you holding it up? Do you want to move forward, or do you want to break for a bite? Tell me where you are. Which would you prefer? I'm sorry? I don't have the magic 8-ball on that, sir. I'm sorry. If the consensus is we'll roll forward, we'll do just that. We will take a 10-minute break for the moment. Thank you. Over there. Can I go ahead? Yeah. I didn't see. All right, folks, we'll go ahead and return to order here. Ms. Edgar, will you read the next docket, please?
Docket PZ 23016, an application has been filed by Dennis Literal for the approval of a preliminary subdivision plan for 6 lots at approximately 7.54 acres to be known as the Cattery at Denison Lane. The property is located at 109 LaGrange Road, Pee Wee Valley. The zoning is R1A Residential District.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Fisher, you're up again.
All right. Ryan Fisher, Senior Planner with Oldham County Planning. So as Ms. Edgar stated, an application's been filed by Dennis Luttrell for the approval of a preliminary subdivision plan for 6 lots on 7.54 acres to be known as the Cattery at Denison Lane. Property is located at 109 LaGrange Road, and it's currently zoned R1A. So there's the site information, which I also just read to you. A little bit of the site history. May 6, 2021, staff issued a minor plat, approved a minor plat to dedicate right-of-way and consolidate lots. This minor plat was actually never recorded and subsequently expired if they're not recorded within a year. So fast forward to November 8th, 2022. Once again, staff approved a minor plat, 22-056, to create an additional tract and dedicate public right-of-way. This would actually create tract 1A, 1B, and 1C, of which 1B is the 7.537 acre tract under consideration here today. And this minor plat was recorded on March 7th, 2023. And I've listed the deed book and page number there for you, just so you know. A little bit of this case history. We actually had a pre-application meeting on this way back on August 8th of 2022. Finally kind of heard back and had a neighborhood meeting in April of 2023. This case was heard at the Technical Review Committee on May 17th. And then looking at this month, we sent out our adjoining property owner notices on the 6th of July, and it appeared in the Oldham era on the same date. Here's the property in question on LaGrange Road and your current zoning. The Oldham County Future Land Use Map predicts that the use of this tract will be single-family city, and you can see the property noted here. So the applicant's proposing a preliminary subdivision plan comprised of those 6 lots on the 7.54 acres to be known as the Cattery at Denison Lane. R1A allows a maximum density of 1.74 dwelling units per acre with a minimum lot size of 1 acre and a minimum lot width of 150 feet. Open space is not required. I have attached to your staff report those R1A restrictions there. And the proposed density on this project is 1 dwelling unit per acre, meets the minimum lot width and minimum lot size requirements. And the plans also reflect 0.30 acres of open space designed for stormwater detention. So here are the plans, which once again you've been provided with full-size copies as well as a smaller set. And then a couple pictures. I did not stand in the middle of the road for this. I did just get these off Google. So just in case you're concerned with my safety, I was not in the middle of the road. So look in one direction and then we'll just look the other. So the applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary subdivision plan for those 6 lots on approximately 7.54 acres to be known as the Cattery at Denison Lane. Some binding elements. The approval applies only to the plans presented today at the July 25th, 2023 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing. This will be no subdivision of any lot into greater number of lots without review by the Oldham County Planning Commission, and the preliminary plan must comply with all established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements at the time of construction plan approval. I did not initially in your staff packet include the TRC note, so I believe at the first break, it was so long ago I can't remember, but at the first break I brought you copies of those TRC notes. I didn't put anything in there about the cumulative phasing because the Oldham County School Board is okay with the 6 permits per year, which is all of the lots that they will need. So those are the only binding elements I have, and that concludes staff's presentation.
I just got one thing to add, just for the sake of consistency. If you notice on the plan, there's only a sidewalk on one side of the street, and that would be on the side that has the residential lots. The other side actually only has a portion of a lot. And so we're going to actually consider a waiver for the sidewalk, because the regulations say it's supposed to be on both sides of the street.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Mr. Fisher, anything else from staff? Mr. Silliman, are you going to share your thoughts with us on this?
Again, Jim Silliman, County Engineer, 100 West Jefferson Street. So it seems like all the docket items have been fairly unique today. The uniqueness here is being in Pewee Valley. We understand that Pewee Valley operates their own MS4, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. Oldham County does not operate that for them, nor are they a co-permittee. So when it comes to permitting, they issue their own stormwater quality management and erosion control permit. The engineer's office for Oldham County does not. We do, however, review the plans in conjunction with the city engineer and provide any assistance they require or request.
And he was here earlier.
He was
I
here
don't
earlier,
see
but
him
he
now.
did have to leave, yes. So Garrett Dean, the current Pewee Valley engineer, we've been in coordination with him and will continue to be. So again, there will be, because this is greater than an acre of land disturbance, they will be required to obtain the KYR10 permit from the Division of Water. That's standard. They'll get their permit for stormwater from the city. They will also require the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet permit for the entrance on the state road. Based on the number of lots, very few lots, this did not rise to the level that would require either a traffic assessment or a traffic impact study. Similarly, I'm going to assume that based on that low volume, the state's not requiring an impact study either. Usually theirs is around 100 trips. This is nowhere near that. Typically, the detention basin, which is shown on the plans, is going to be encompassed and will be encompassed by a drainage easement to be recorded by the Oldham County Clerk. We'll coordinate with the engineer for the applicant on that. And the only other item is Mr. Urban mentioned at TRC, we had pointed out the subdivision requirements for a sidewalk, so it sounds like there's going to be a waiver entertained similar to or consistent with the first docket this afternoon. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Silliman. Does that complete staff's presentation? All right, we'll move into presentation from applicant. Mr. Swansburg.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, good afternoon at this point. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Mike Swansburg, partner at law firm Swansburg & Smith, PLLC, located at 117 West Main Street here in LaGrange, again, just on the other side of the courthouse. Here to represent Dennis Luttrell and Associates, the applicant in this case. In addition to myself, we're also going to have Mr. Gambrell, who is the engineer here, potentially testify in this fact. So, Mr. Chairman, if you want, I understand I'm under a continuing obligation to tell the truth to the commission, which I will absolutely do, but I want to go ahead and ask Mr. Gambrell if he can just be sworn in at this point for the purpose of our presentation.
Thank you.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Thank you.
Members of the commission, this is as Mr. Fisher kind of indicated, this is a pretty straightforward request. What the applicant at this point is asking is simply to approve a preliminary plat. There's also a discussion about a waiver in terms of the sidewalks, which I will attempt to address here as well, and ask Mr. Gambrell if he can possibly chime in based on our understanding and looking at the development plan. Again, looking back at what the law says and the legal basis or justification for the commission in allowing it to move forward with one of these types of requests, we would argue, this proposal satisfies the general intent of Oldham County subdivision regulations as they are set forth, particularly in Oldham County subdivision regulation, section 1.2A through K. Specifically, we ask the commission to find that the proposal promotes the health, safety, general welfare of Oldham County by meeting the existing requirements set forth in the county subdivision regulations, subject, of course, to the waiver that was presented by Mr. Fisher. Also, that it comports with Oldham County Comprehensive Plan, particularly Land Use Objective LU-1-1, which relates to its compatibility with surrounding land uses, which are similarly zoned and utilized as this particular proposal is being proposed. Again, this is a fill-in, for lack of a better term, fill-in proposal that is surrounded by other development, and we're simply asking it to we submit that in fact is compatible with those adjoining properties. And also Land Use Objective LU-2-1, which talks about promoting connectivity between neighborhoods and compatibility, again, with adjacent development, as I just discussed. And you saw the picture there on 146 heading out there, setting aside the train, and Mr. Fisher's attempts at circumventing both lanes of the road. We talk about the additional development that's already apparent on the side of 146 there. And this is our position, very much consistent with what you were seeing there on 146 as you head out of Pee Wee Valley toward Crestwood. Proposal for the subdivision, we would submit in furtherance of that prevents overcrowding of the land. We're talking about 1 acre tracts here. We're not talking about less than 1 acre. Also protects the character and social and economic stability of Oldham County. I actually, Mr. Fisher, has graciously offered again to hand out a document to you all, which is a proposed document which lays out what I'm talking about here. We would also submit that the proposal does not or will not endanger or overburden existing transportation, water, sewage, drainage, recreation, or other public facilities. The subdivision will not hinder the proper circulation of traffic or create additional congestion within Oldham County. We're talking about 6 lots. The proposed subdivision meets the reasonable standards for design of a subdivision by incorporating proper lot sizes, proper set-offs, and required road frontage for current zoning designation R1A, which is what the current designation is, as you saw on the map. And also that it incorporates existing public facilities without placing an undue burden on the ability of those facilities to serve the surrounding areas. And finally, we believe that the subdivision minimizes pollution and preserves natural features through the use of, again, those 1 acre tracts that we talked about, as well as additional remedial measures designed to reduce the potential impact on the natural contours of the land, as you can see in the proposal itself. Those, again, I would submit are examples of why we believe ultimately this proposal meets the Oldham County subdivision regulations, particularly, as I said, section 1.2A through K. And at this time, what I'll do is ask Mr. Gambrell to come up and talk to you all a little bit about the technical aspect of it, and if possible, address the issue of the potential waiver here.
Let's get your name and address for the record, please.
Phil Gambrell, Prism Engineering, 2309 Watterson Trail, Louisville, Kentucky, 40299. I've got a nice slide presentation here, but due to the time frame and this being fairly simple, I will go through it quickly and rely, if I miss something or you don't understand something that I have mentioned, please ask. If not, we won't waste any extra time. The Coultrier at Denison Lane. My design process, I'll go through it quickly for you. First of all, I took the existing conditions of the site. As you can see, it rose from the front to the back corner, the northeast corner. Portions of the site are wooded. That's what is in these hatched areas. That's all of the densely wooded areas. In our proposal and in our covenants and restrictions, this lightly hatched area along here where the roadway will be are the only trees that will be allowed to be removed. In the covenants restrictions, any trees to be removed by a landowner has to be approved by the developer. And he's pretty adamant about keeping trees. He's stressed that to me quite a bit. So in my process, I take the existing conditions. Through my research, I went to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, to the Oldham County section, got our soil types to assure that we were in an area that was adequate for septic systems, because we are proposing the 1 acre tracts and no sewer system. So we will be on a septic. The site has been looked at by the health department. They've done their test hose, initial test hose, and passed with flying colors. Next, made sure that we had no flood hazards for the site. As I mentioned earlier, it rose from the front to the back. The northeast corner is the beginning of a drainage way, and that showed up on the National Wetlands Inventory. As you can see, the ravine here. This is actually off of our site, but our site is right here at the edge. So I wanted to make sure that I took that into consideration. There are no wetlands or hydric soils at all on the site. That led me to the development plan, or the preliminary subdivision plan that's in front of you today. I was very creative in making sure we had exactly 1 acre lots. Some of them may only be 5 or 6 square feet more than 1 acre, but they are all more than 1 acre. The natural spot for stormwater detention for the site, again, is in the northeast corner where all of the drainage goes to. We have an open space lot dedicated and will be dedicated by easement, drainage easement to Oldham County for the detention basin. One of the things that we are going to be utilizing for the basin is it will be what's called a bowel basin. Oldham County has stormwater management requirements for both quantity and quality. So what we're going to be doing is the outlet of this basin will be not at the bottom like they normally are. It's going to be elevated to a point that what's called the first flush, it's the first ½ inch of rainfall, will not go out of the outlet structure. It will remain in the basin. The basin will have approximately 2 to 3 feet of the bottom of it dug out and replaced with what's called an engineered soil. It's a mixture of natural soil, sand, and small gravel. That area then will be planted with forbs. It's a form of a vegetation that the roots of the forbs actually absorb, take in pollutants. That's how they get their nutrients. So the basin itself will naturally take care of the stormwater quality portion, and we will not have to put in a separate stormwater quality unit. They're just ugly and very expensive. And I would love to see wildflowers and forbs growing here instead of a big concrete structure. And that's it in a nutshell, very quickly. Be happy to answer any questions.
We'll get to that. Thank you. Mr. Swansburg, anything additional from your perspective?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, at this point, I don't have anything else to add to this. Actually, I apologize, Mr. Granville.
One quick thing that I missed,
Please.
the waiver. As you can see from the plan, on the north side of Dennison Lane, we have the sidewalk that comes full length, wraps around the cul-de-sac, and extends in front of Lot 6, so that every lot within the development has direct access to a sidewalk. However, the section of roadway along the adjoining property line, we do not have a sidewalk because there aren't any lots that need to access it. So, and I agree with Jim that, you know, we probably, for technical reasons, need to request a waiver because we're not on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else here present who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application? Please. Let's get you sworn.
Yep,
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And
I'm
name and
Clay-
address for the record, please.
Clayton Stess, and I live at 109 LaGrange Road. Claudia and I moved there almost 35 years ago, and at that point, we really enjoyed the idea of having almost 10 acres. We've had 2 weddings there. We've had numerous parties, a number of community events, and a lot of family events, and we've enjoyed it a lot. But it's getting a little more than I can manage to take care of all 10 acres. So we still plan on staying there, contrary to our children's advice, with about 2.5 acres and the house. And we look forward to our new neighbors, really do. I was very impressed when I met Dennis Luttrell, and he's an architect, developer, and a builder, and wants to, I think, build a very nice development. And the thing that impressed me the most that I liked about it is that it won't have a big subdivision entrance. It'll be like going down Dogwood or Tuliphurst. It's just a street that you go down, and then there's 6 houses off of it. And ironically, I found some old plans from I guess that whole area, Dogwood and our place that's called the Owl's Nest. And it actually had one plan, all of that divided into a subdivision like Dogwood. It was like a continuation of Dogwood. So I guess that hopefully may come to fruition now. But I'm very excited about it. I think it'll be a nice development and a nice addition to the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stess. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this application? All right, and being none, we'll move into testimony and questions from those opposed to this application. Let's get you sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And name and address for the record, please.
James Allison, 103 Castlewood Drive, Pee Wee Valley. I'm not really objecting to the subdivision, but they showed up there that on Dennison Lane is the only place trees will be removed. And right at the intersection of Dennison Lane and LaGrange Road is a row of trees along LaGrange Road. And I would like to make sure that some of those trees get removed for line of sight of the people coming out of Dennison Lane. I know I come out of Ash Avenue every evening into the traffic around 6 o'clock, and trying to see down the road in either direction is a problem. This would be the same type of thing where people come out. So I just want to make sure that there's not trees left that interfere with the line of sight up through that way. And also, as far as any plantings that would be put back in, that they be planting such that they don't grow up into line of sight.
Thank you, sir. Anything else? Anyone else wishing to ask questions, provide testimony, opposition, or in general? Very well. We'll move into, where are we here? Questions from the commission. Who has questions? Crickets. All right. Going once, going twice, guys. All right, so we'll move into a rebuttal from applicant. Mr. Swansburg, do you have anything that you'd like to share with us?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have rebuttal so much, but if Mr. Gambrell wants to, he wants to just at least address that concern, just to make sure that's noted for the record.
Yes, we are very serious about not removing trees. However, with that stated, we will be required to get a KYTC permit to encroachment permit, and part of that permit we have to create their sight triangle at the entrance, so that situations that was discussed where trees are blocking your view to get out on the roadway, there will be clearing to create that site triangle. So,
Thank you, Mr. Cantrell. Okay. Mr. Swansburg, do you have anything to add for your final statements? I'm sorry. Mr. Allison, do you have anything to add for your final? Okay. Don't sit.
I just want to get out of the way, Mr. Chairman. I want to be out of the way.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, again, thank you very much for your consideration of this particular proposal. We believe it's a pretty straightforward one, as I've already indicated earlier. We believe that overall, this particular proposal meets the requirements for the Oldham County subdivision regulations. In terms of, again, just kind of stating for the record, Mr. Gambrell talked about the sidewalk and it being face fronting for every particular lot that is contemplated on there. Obviously, if you notice at the bottom, there are lots that are not within the original contemplated lot that would be encompassed by this particular proposal. And quite frankly, you might have, I'll just go ahead and note for the record, they're either having to utilize adjacent properties which have not given such approval or have theoretically sidewalks to nowhere if you have no houses in front of them at the end of the day. So given that it abuts a particular, a number of adjacent properties for which there is not control, and given that it otherwise meets the spirit of the subdivision regulations, particularly sub 5.5, where it talks about needing sidewalks in front, really says in front of both sides of the road, but quite frankly, the intention from our perspective is that, in fact, provide sidewalks for every landowner within that subdivision. We believe that the hardship of essentially requiring either adjacent property owners to agree to a sidewalk or to create sidewalks for which there is no practical benefit otherwise is a basis for you all to approve the waiver of the sidewalk regulation under section 9.1 of the Oldham County subdivision regulations, where strict compliance would create an undue hardship because of exceptional topographic or other natural or man-made physical conditions encountered on the particular land. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I again appreciate the Commission's time today and questions, and we simply ask that you all approve this plat and the waiver as requested.
Thank you for your being succinct, gentlemen. Mr. Urban.
Yeah, again, we are first to consider a waiver from Section 5.5 of the Oldham County subdivision regulations for a sidewalk, which if you choose to make a motion, I think you can rely on the testimony that you just heard regarding that waiver, and also that the design innovations of this case, which are only lots on only one side of the street, will achieve the basic objectives of the regulations because they are providing sidewalks on that side. So first for your consideration is the waiver.
All right. Ms. Davis?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve. The motion to approve complies with the objectives of both the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinances and the subdivision regulations.
Ms. Davis, we're looking for a discussion on the sidewalk waiver?
Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion.
Mr. Baxter?
That's an adequate motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Mr. Halfling, thank you. Mr. Falvey, did you have a question? I'm sorry, I did not mean to start without you. All right, any discussion? We'll move into roll call vote.
Mr. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Elder,
Yes.
Mr. Halfling,
Yes.
Mr. Winters,
Yes.
Ms. Nasser,
Yes.
Ms. Walzer,
Yes.
Mr. Hampton,
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for approval on the sidewalk waiver has been approved by a vote of 9-0. Mr. Urban?
The next for your consideration is the preliminary subdivision plan. There's sample motions for either approval or denial on page 3. The proposed binding elements, the first one is that the approval applies only to the plan presented at the July 25th, 2023 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing. The second is there shall be no subdivision of any lot into greater number of lots without review by the Oldham County Planning Commission. Third is that the preliminary plan must comply with the established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements at the time of construction plan approval. I've added this simple one that the applicant is to clear site distance at Kentucky 146 according to KYTC requirements. Pretty standard.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Any questions? All right, floor is open for a motion on the development plan. Mr. Falvey?
Yep, so I'd like to make the motion to approve the preliminary subdivision plan. It complies with objectives LU-1-1 and LU-2-1 of the comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinance, and the subdivisions regulations as in 1.2.A through K. And I'd like to incorporate Jim Urban's
Binding elements.
thank you.
Thank you,
Binding
sir.
elements.
Mr. Baxter, we good?
We're good, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Mr. Finney, thank you. Discussion. We'll move into roll call vote. Ms. Edgar?
Mr. Winters,
Yes.
Ms. Nasser,
Yes.
Ms. Walzer,
Yes.
Mr. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Halfling,
Yes.
Mr. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Elder.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. And the motion to approve the development plan has passed on a vote of 9-0. Thank you, everyone. So, Jim, Ryan, what do we have coming up?
Yep.
Education and training reports. I think everybody's seen that the amount of hours that you got.
Yeah, I'll just be real brief. Christy handed out before the meeting your training hours. I try to do that in the middle of the year for those, especially they're going to have their 2-year period come up in December. If there's something on there that's an error, I didn't get something, you said I turned it in, I watched a video, and I missed it, just let me know. And then I know we had Mr. Halfling turned in some credit that he's looking to receive from something he went to outside for his other employment. So if you've got anything for that, we can bring to the board next month for approval of those hours. I appreciate that as well.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have
Anything
any
in the pipeline for next?
Yes. Yep.
So for those that are on SRC, don't forget we'll see you Thursday for study review. And then we do have one thing on the agenda for next month. So I believe that's the 22nd is that meeting date? I believe so. Because there's 5 Tuesdays. So the 22nd.
It's been affirmed.
You are required 8 hours
In 2
every
years.
2 years. Yeah. And it falls on when you came on, so everybody's kind of all over the place. So that's why I gave it to you all to figure out who's going to expire in December.
Very well. Anything else, guys? You guys, you ready to get out of here? Let's do that.